I want to welcome you to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our fancy warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. We may curse to reinforce this concept. This is not intentionally a show for children, and we hope that you'll still enjoy it anyway. Anyhow, I want to welcome you to this episode. My name is Dave Beaty. And for nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, things like Justice League of America, Batman Incorporated, and even some things people probably haven't heard of, like Grifter, for example, or Irredeemable. Anyhow, enough about that. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you've done as a creative professional.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Base God 14, Base God 14. That's not Bass God 14. That is Base God 14. And I am the Chief Financial Officer of Bad Bob Productions, a small production company based in the Phoenix metro area. And I am also the associate producer of a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently available for streaming for free on Tubi.
Very cool. So if you don't mind sharing the screen or bringing up the pop culture news graphic. So as with every episode of the Retro Rogues, we always start off with pop culture news. That means anything that's going on in the world of pop culture that happens to catch our attention. Sometimes it's just something fun. Sometimes it's something incendiary. It just really depends upon what's actually going on that week. So tell me, Eric, what kind of fun stuff do you have for pop culture news?
Well, this is a little bit of a teaser, because I can't get too much into the article, because if I do, we're going to do spoilers, and we always try to do our reviews non-spoiler first and then get into spoilers. I want to give everybody a little teaser here. For people that aren't aware, this is from Daily Star Trek News, and it says, Star Trek Picard showrunner Michael Chabon responds to fan questions. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but Michael Chabon actually took on some big fan questions on his Instagram account. And when we talk about our review later in the show, especially when we get into spoilers for our Picard review, I'm going to actually show everybody his Instagram answers to questions from fans. And I thought you and I could do some commentary and some response to what he says.
Okay, sounds good.
So did you hear about this, by the way, his Instagram post?
I know that I heard some about it. But honestly, I didn't. You know, it's one of those things with Picard. I'm at the point now where I'm okay to just kind of roll with things. So I honestly haven't given it a lot of thought, because there's things, you know, that we've already discussed that I like about Picard, and there's other things about Picard that I'm not a big fan of. So at this point, for me personally, I'm just watching the show and hoping not to get too terribly angry.
Right on. Well, some of the things that some of the more hardcore fans, particularly addressing issues that, you know, I always care about, because I always care about the lore. I care about continuity. That's my angle. That's where I always come at this stuff from. And so he took on some specific controversies within the last episode or two, and addressed them, and at least gave his 2 cents, which I appreciate. You know, I mentioned when we were talking about the first episode of The Ready Room with Will Wheaton that I was really surprised and really enjoyed Michael Chabon's candor about the behind the scenes of making the show. Obviously, being involved with film production myself, I really appreciate that kind of stuff. I really like that kind of stuff. So again, this is a little bit of a teaser, because I don't want to get it, because there are spoilers in this. So I don't want to get into spoilers before we actually start our review, but I did want to mention this and also see if you had heard of it. So.
All right. So are you going to go through them, or are you going to bring up his?
Like I said, there's spoilers, so that's a tease.
Okay, got it.
That's a tease for our review, because
later in the show. Got it.
Yeah, later in the show, when we get into spoiler territory, I'll bring up the Chabon's Instagram to address, because a lot of the questions that were brought up are things that irritated me or I was upset about in the episode, and he actually talks about it. He actually gives his take on why he did that.
Oh, okay. Well, that will be interesting. If you don't mind sharing my screen, I've actually got a news item here. So this is kind of a fun thing. Um, this is from the Hollywood Reporter. Um, I have developed quite an affinity for the little Funko Pop characters. I've got quite a few of them now, and I thought this was interesting. This has been kind of breaking for the last several days, but Baby Yoda, aka the child from The Mandalorian, is already the top pre-ordered Funko Pop of all time. So this is from February 6th. This is from an article by Ryan Parker. You can actually find this on the Hollywood Reporter. There's a fun shot of Baby Yoda in the hands of the Mandalorian. It's bananas, art director Reese O'Brien says of the popularity. The child, aka Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, is already the top pre-order Funko Pop of all time, and the figure isn't even out until May. Funko art director Reese O'Brien revealed the news on Thursday via a Twitter video in which he discussed the development of the toy. It's bananas, O'Brien said of the figure's popularity. He added the company was sent design specs for the character on a need-to-know basis. No one was shown early episodes of the series prior to Disney sending over character information. So this is just kind of a fun little story. And then you can read this over in the Hollywood Reporter. For those people who are interested in pre-ordering the Baby Yoda Funko Pop, I'm going to go ahead and recommend Entertainment Earth. That's where I've been getting most of mine. I just suppose enjoyed doing business with Entertainment Earth. They are not a paid sponsor of this show, although we would not hurt our feelings if they decided to do so. So anyhow, that's my news item. I am debating on getting both the Funko Pop Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian. They've got two different Mandalorians. One where he's got, his sniper disintegration rifle in his hands, and then there's one where it's like slung on his back. So I've been kind of debating. So and they have a whole bunch of them. Like they're doing Cara Dune. They're doing I can't remember Apollo Creed's character's name.
I don't either.
Yeah, but they've got a whole bunch of them that they're doing. They've even got Quill, and he's on that little weird creature, and they've got the Mandalorian on the little weird, I forget what they're called, the little two-legged creature thing. So they've got a whole bunch of them. If you collect Funko Pops, or if you like the Mandalorian and you're looking for something interesting to collect that isn't going to set you back like a fortune, because Funko Pops are like $10 or $11 if you get them at initial release. So it's kind of an affordable way to collect something fun. They don't take up a lot of room. They stand really good. They don't fall over, super easily. So that's kind of why I like them. They're relatively inexpensive. They don't take up a lot of room. They don't fall over all the time. Because certain things, like, for example, this guy here, he's really cool, but he falls over a lot. So.
Oh, that is cool. That is very cool. Yeah. I like that a lot. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's neat. What is that? Is that supposed to be kind of like a prototype, or is that supposed to be kind of like what is that exactly?
Well, this is from the Black Series. This was a Christmas gift from my brother like several years ago. It basically, at one point, Boba Fett was going to be some sort of specialized stormtrooper.
Oh,
and so the original,
it is like a prototype.
Yeah. So the original versions of him, he was all in white. Like if you stay, I think on YouTube, unless they pulled it down, you can see like a lot of the test footage that they shot actually for it way back in the day, but it's all white. But yeah, this is one of the coolest, and this is actually cloth. It's not plastic.
Oh, that is nice. So, that is a very nice piece.
Yeah, and I don't know how hard it is to get that now or whatever, but it was a gift from my brother, and I don't have like a ton of things sitting on my desk because they fall over. Like he's pretty good. He stands pretty good, but he is pretty bad about falling over sometimes. Yeah. And I noticed the more intricate and the more articulation, the more prone they are to fall over. But the thing that's fun about the Funko Pops is because they've got a nice sturdy base. You'd have to really be having a scream fit argument and slamming your fist,
right?
In order to really knock them over. So that's one of my pop culture news items. So
yeah, the one thing that I still think is funny, but it looks like the article does touch on it a little bit, is that this stuff isn't out already. This is a pre-order.
Right.
This is not available right now. But I heard you when you were
Not yet.
when you were talking about the article that apparently they were not given early access. They weren't allowed to see like the episodes or anything like that because apparently Baby Yoda was meant to be a secret. Seems to me they still could have done something. I mean, they could have at least made a deal with one toy manufacturer. Hey, this is a big secret. This is, so don't let anything out. Keep the circle very, very tight. I can't imagine in this day and age, it's really that difficult to go from prototype to production in this day and age. Because I see independent creators doing that. George, who commented on the show before, he does some beautiful like 3D. They're essentially like 3D sculptures, model kits on his site and stuff like that. And he's an independent creator. So it surprises me that they couldn't make the time work. Apparently, I guess because they wanted to keep it so secret. Because I feel like it's a huge missed opportunity. Certainly, I've talked many times. Christmas was a huge missed opportunity for Baby Yoda toys and merchandise and things like that.
Yeah, and then we have a comment
about the Boba Fett.
Yeah, that is the. Yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a very nice piece. That's very detailed.
And then
I like that.
Like the blaster, like his blaster actually comes out of the holster, so you can
that's cool.
give him like his handheld blaster too. So, and then it goes right back in. It's a pretty slick piece. It's one of the nicest ones I've got. That's not like a hot toy because I do have a couple hot toys. Those are really expensive ones, but that one was a gift. Oh, and since Mike commented, can we plug the stuff real quick here for the contest?
Absolutely.
I forget again. I get nervous when we start the show and I forget to plug things. So I want to encourage people. We're still doing our survey. If you have not taken part in the survey yet, there's a contest on there. If you take part in the survey and you fill it out and you opt into our email newsletter, we are going to be doing a drawing. You'll be entered there, and you have the chance to win this. This is an inked sample page that I did many years ago for Brightest Day when I worked for DC Comics. This is over David Finch's pencils. This is inked over a blue line, but this is still, and if you can tell, this is ink on a board. This is not a digital piece. You go to davebeaty.com and take part in the survey. It is the main item on the latest news page. Please participate in our survey. We're using that information to help craft a really nice, basically email newsletter and also a quarterly digital magazine for you, our dear viewer, our dear listener. And it's going to be fun. It's something fun you're going to be able to enjoy. It's not going to cost you anything. None of this costs you anything. We just want you to go over. Please take part in the survey. Help us create a better show. Help us create more fun things for you. And you have the opportunity to win this. Now, in addition to that, in tonight's show, this is what we're giving away. We do a drawing every episode in the chat. Please, U.S. shipping only. But this is what we're going to be doing for the show. One of our topics this episode is Spider-Ham. So this is the thing that we're going to be doing a raffle for. So please comment during the episode. It's a fun sketch of Spider-Ham there, the classic version. And we'll be doing a drawing for this towards the end of the show. So please comment, and you will be entered into a chance to win that. All right, so enough promotional stuff. So yeah, all right, there you go. All right, do you want to do another pop culture news item, or do you want me to do one? Because I do have one more.
Yes, I do have another one, but we have a couple comments from Mike as well, where he said cool. Regarding that prototype, he says he has him. I have him in the box because I'm one of those guys. Laugh out loud. Which I do understand that. I understand keeping it in the box. I totally get that. In fact, I've had debates with friends about that before. And then he also said that Death Storm is amazing, and so he definitely dug the art. So.
Cool. At some point, maybe on another episode, if we want to talk about Death Storm, depending upon how people feel about it, I actually My mom actually managed to find me one. In the UK, they have those Eagle Moss. They're like little lead figurines they make. Brightest Day at one point was so popular, they actually produced one of Deathstorm, and it's actually based off of the artwork that Scott and I did. So it's sculpted, but it's like the same pose as Deathstorm from the issue. Our art is on the cover of the little informational magazine that comes with the Eagle Moss figure. And they also did one for Grifter, too. So I actually have two Eagle Moss figurines. Those might be fun to show on the show at some point. Those are kind of fun. But yeah, I'm quite partial to Deathstorm. There's a few things I worked on in DC Comics I'm quite proud of. I love the fact that we put the Atom in that weird mechanized Iron Man looking suit, and then he wears it on TV all the time. So that was kind of fun. And then, of course, our contribution to Deathstorm, which I'm quite proud of as well. So
very cool.
But thank you, Mike, for the comments. And you're entered into the drawing. I would encourage people, please, as the show goes forward, please comment. The comments and the conversation makes it more entertaining for us. I think more entertaining for you. And like I said, you are entered into opportunity to win some more art. And everything will be going into the mail soon. I'm not dragging my feet. I am waiting on some little plastic top loaders to put the cards in, because I'm fearful for what the United States Postal Service will do to these cards if I don't put them in something to protect them. But hopefully here, once I receive those, they're going to be going out. So the wait's not going to be too much longer. I want to apologize to everyone. I wasn't really prepared to start shipping stuff out, and I thought I was, and I didn't have any top loaders. I've just got those little flimsy ones, and we need something nicer to send them out in.
Mike mentioned, he said he has a beautiful Deathstorm from Scott Clark.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. I think Scott actually sketched that for Mike, I think, at an event in Las Vegas, if I remember correctly. Mike's a pretty good friend. I met him in Vegas. I think it was either Alternate Reality or Maximum Comics. It was one of the two events I did actually in Las Vegas with Scott. I think I did three signings at different stores at different times. I keep meaning to go back, but until we have a national release publication for Red Skirts, or you know what I mean, it's just not. I don't feel like it warrants it just yet. So too much talk about my art. Let's move on. I'm getting uncomfortable.
That's fun stuff to talk about, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm sure you saw this news. I'm sure that you at least had a passing interest in the Oscars, most likely for one particular film that we reviewed on a previous podcast. But I thought I would go over some of the top winners of the Oscars. Did you watch this year, Dave? Did you actually watch the Oscars?
I did not watch the Oscars. My wife and I watched the Golden Globes, but yeah, we just didn't watch the Oscars.
So one little tidbit here, I guess, of history. I believe Parasite was the first Best Picture winner ever that's not in English. Is that your understanding as well? This is the first Best Picture winner that is not an English language film. It's a Korean film, Parasite. I have not seen it. I've heard good things about it, but I thought I would acknowledge that. And of course, the main reason that I was interested in the Oscars was because of Joaquin Phoenix. We did review The Joker. We both highly recommended it. We both loved that film. And Joaquin Phoenix appears to have done a clean sweep of all the major awards. I believe he won the Golden Globes, the SAG. He won the British version of the Oscars, essentially, and then he won the Oscars. So I think those are considered the top major awards, and he won all of them for Best Actor for Joker. And I would say well-deserved win there.
Yeah.
Also, we are this was my mistake, unfortunately, but we had intended to do a focus on all the different actors that have played the Joker over many years, and we were going to do it like right around Oscar time, like either right before it or right after it. And I got the timing all wrong, so that was my fault. So I just want to mention that in a future episode, we are going to do this. We are going to go back and we are going to go ahead, and it is sort of like in honor of Joaquin Phoenix clean sweep of the awards. We're going to talk about all the actors that have played the Joker, and that's going to be coming up on an upcoming episode.
And we have something very special planned for that you are not going to want to miss. It's going to be something people are going to be talking about.
So I think it'll be fun.
Yeah.
And then Mike mentioned wasn't. Now I'm going to butcher the name.
It's Taika Waititi.
The first Maury to win an Oscar for Jojo Rabbit. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I hadn't heard that. I would just take your word for it, Mike, because I'm not sure if that's correct.
Yeah,
sounds like it could be, but
yeah. Unfortunately, like I said, I missed the Oscars this year. I don't have a good excuse other than there's just been, for me personally, there's just been a lot going on, and I honestly just missed it. And normally my wife and I, we make a point to watch it, but just this year there was so much going on and so many different polls and demands on my time. I just totally missed it.
Yeah, I missed it as well, but I did catch this. Like what I usually do with a lot of this stuff is, I'm, as I mentioned on the show all the time, I'm most active on Twitter, so I just see the Twitter hashtags, and Oscars was trending that night, so I could see all the awards as they were coming out and all that kind of stuff. So that's usually how I keep track of things like this. Sundays for me are usually kind of like family day, so it's very rare that I'm able to actually watch a lot of this stuff.
Very cool. All right, so I have and just so anyone's noticed, I'm still kind of getting over something, so I am sucking on some cough drops here, but it prevents me from coughing in everyone's ear. So I do have another pop culture news article item I wanted to cover. If you don't mind sharing my screen. So this is something interesting I was alerted to by actually a viewer and a friend of the show. She sent me some information about this, and she said, "Did you hear about this comics-themed restaurant that's in Phoenix?" And I said, "Why, no, I have not. Please tell me more." So this is an article. It's on azcentral.com. And it's basically Avengers Assemble. Here's what to expect at Phoenix's new comic book themed restaurant. Comics X Restaurant in Desert Ridge will be the chain's first U.S. spot. Comics X, a new comic themed restaurant, bar, and shop, opens at Desert Ridge Marketplace. Actually, open on Wednesday, December 4th. And it features a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Let me get over here and we'll take a look at some other photos. They've got a bunch of big figurines of different characters from the comics and the movies. There's Rocket right there. Let's see if we close this out. Let's see if we go to full screen. Well, that didn't work now, did it? That's not what I wanted. I thought I would go to full screen and we could see the photos a little bit better. But anyhow, it's a comics themed restaurant, and it is open in Phoenix, Arizona, for our viewers and listeners who actually live in the Phoenix, Arizona area. We are an Arizona-based show, so this is kind of in our backyard, so it's something fun that we would cover. There's a fun Iron Man. I haven't had a chance to check this out. Here's a Batman and a Catwoman. Looks like they've got some fun decor, some Simpsons characters. There's Wonder Woman, Captain America. They've got a Captain America display. Anyhow, looks like something fun to check out in the Phoenix area. So it's called Comics X, and it's at the Desert Ridge Marketplace, and it's in Phoenix, Arizona for our viewers and listeners who live in the area. Something kind of fun, but a comic-themed restaurant. Had you heard about this at all, Eric, before I sent you the news item, or?
No, before you said anything, I had no idea about this. And you said it's going to be at Desert Ridge, right? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
At Desert Ridge. I know where that is. In fact, that's actually really close to where my brother works. My brother works at the Musical Instrument Museum, which is right down the street from Desert Ridge. So it is kind of like a tourist hotspot. And that'll be cool. I'm already thinking maybe we could do a live class from there sometime. We can talk to the manager.
Yeah.
Try to do something like that, because that'd be a lot of fun. We can maybe even do a review of the restaurant and stuff. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. So I definitely would check it out.
Well, and we're talking about coming up with a reason for the two of us to be like in the same room at the same time and do the show. That would be a very fun opportunity and something that would totally fit with our, the theme of the show and what we cover. So
Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
So if people are interested, you can definitely, it's called Comics X. But again, this item is on azcentral.com. So something fun to check out.
Very cool. And PJ from Orville Nation stopped by. He said, Retro Rogues, the best channel on YouTube. Thank you, PJ. Thank you, Orville Nation.
Thank you.
As always, you are our biggest supporter out here. So we always appreciate the kudos from you and also the quality that you do on your channel. Anybody that's not aware of Orville Nation, please go check them out. They do actor interviews. They had a great interview with Corin Nemec that comes to mind. They've had multiple actors. They had the actor who played Martog, the actor who played Icheb. They've interviewed them. Plus, they just have tons of fans, tons of people just like you, and they'll even put them on the show. The panel that I did, it was all kinds of people in terms of their level of content. You know what I mean? So they're very inclusive. PJ, who organized Orville Nation, is a real leader in that regard, and it's a great friend of the show. So thank you so much for the kind words, PJ. We really appreciate it and all your support.
And again, I want to encourage everyone. Thanks, Orville Nation, for contributing to the chat. Anyone who participates in the chat tonight, you're entered into a drawing to win this sketch here of Spider-Ham. This is a sketch I actually did this morning. This one's kind of interesting because you can see all the construction lines. So for kind of a process here, you want to dissect how I might throw something together, you can actually maybe pull some interesting observations from that. So thank you again, everyone who comments and is part of the show. It makes it more fun and entertaining for everyone.
Absolutely.
So let's, do you have another item for pop culture news?
Let's see. So sometimes I get my streaming wars confused with pop culture, so I just want to make sure. I don't believe so. I think that everything else, no. I do have one. Yep, I have one.
Okay.
Little bit of a bummer, and usually I don't like to do this when we do a segment. I usually like to start high and end low. But I did want to talk about this because this is interesting to me. And this article is pretty good because it kind of included everyone. So if you're not aware, a lot of people were upset about the in memoriam section of the Oscars because there were several actors that were omitted. The big one I think that was trending the most was Luke Perry. Luke Perry passed away recently, and he was not featured in the in memoriam section of the Oscars. And this is a pretty good article here from Yahoo Entertainment, and this is dated February 11th of this year. And it gave the Academy's response, this is the quote. This is the Academy's response to Luke Perry. And there's some other actors I want to give shout outs to here that they mentioned in the article. It says the Academy receives hundreds of requests to include loved ones and industry colleagues in the Oscars in memoriam segment. An official statement from the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences read, an executive committee representing every branch considers a list and makes selections for the telecast based on limited available time. All the submissions are included on Oscar.com and will remain on the site throughout the year. Luke Perry and Cameron Boyce are remembered in the Oscar.com gallery. Cameron Boyce is an actor I don't know a whole lot about. I do know that he was also, there was a lot of people on Twitter that were upset that he was not included in the Oscars, the in memoriam. But the thing that makes Perry's omission so glaring is apparently Perry is actually in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's actually in that movie. So he's in a movie that actually was being honored that year, and yet he was not included in the in memoriam portion of the program. Also regarding film, he was in the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is kind of a cult classic. Obviously, that's what led to the Buffy series that there's so many fans of. He also appeared in The Fifth Element, and he was in another film called 8 Seconds. So, but the glaring omission with Perry, I think, has to be that he was actually in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which had numerous nominations, and then he was not featured in the in memoriam section of the show. And there's various Twitter comments here from celebrities and things like that were upset. And I kind of wanted to single out one over here, which is from Holly Robinson Pete. And she said, in 2002, when my dad, Matthew Robinson, the original Gordon from Sesame Street, was included in the TV Academy Memoriam, it was such a great moment for our family. Here are a few people, in my opinion, who should have been included last night. And she talks about Cameron Boyce, Luke Perry, and Rene Auberjonois, because he was not included in the In Memoriam section either. So I would like to include them in ours and say, yes, we remember Rene Auberjonois, we remember Luke Perry. As I said, I'm not that familiar with Cameron Boyce. I know a lot of other people are, and we're upset, but I thought that I would give some recognition to these actors that passed, and because they weren't recognized by the Oscars. So let's recognize them here.
Yeah. I'd heard about the Luke Perry thing, and I didn't realize that they missed Rene Auberjonois and so many others. But yeah, I guess some people said.
And Mike mentions, thank you for saving me here. He says Cameron Boyce was in Disney's Descendants and Grown Ups. He said also Sid Haig was left out, and that is mentioned in this article. This is a good article. If you're concerned about this, there's Sid Haig right there. Horror scene to this. Sid Haig was an absolute legend, a wonderful actor, and a beautiful human being. For him to be blatantly ignored by the Academy for their In Memoriam section is absolute disgrace. And he says also goes for Luke Perry and Cameron Boyce. So there's also Sid Haig. That's why it's nice to have people contribute to the show, because when I forget stuff, people call us out on it. And look, we even have it there in the article. So yes, Sid Haig, obviously, we did talk about him when he passed. We did recognize him on this show. Sid Haig was a huge person in the Comic-Con scene. He was at so many events. I remember seeing him at San Diego Comic-Con and other events like that. And I met him in my capacity as a staffer at the Phoenix Comic-Con. I invited him to the Phoenix Comic-Con, and he was very nice to me and gracious and all that kind of stuff. So good catch there, Mike.
When we were at San Diego Comic-Con actually promoting Bushy Tales, Lynn Workman, who's former host of the only audio version of this show, and then Micah, my wife, we were at San Diego, and we actually ran into him actually at one of the shuttle buses at, as the convention was kind of winding down at the evening, and he was very cordial and nice, and spoke with Len and I, and actually stopped to take a picture. So yeah, he was a pretty nice dude, and a legend. One of the things that heavily influenced things like Red Skirts, for example, my webcomic I do with Al Sparrow, is things like Jason of Star Command, and he actually played the villain in Jason of Star Command, for those people who remember that Saturday morning live action kids show. He's known as a horror icon, but I just remember him from things like Jason of Star Command, Buck Rogers. I mean, he was just in all this fun genre entertainment, just a genre entertainment legend in my mind, because he was in so many different things. So just a tremendous career, because I can think of so many things I saw him in just off the top of my head. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Is that good for pop culture? Do we want to move on to our Streaming Wars segment?
I think we're good for Streaming Wars. Yeah.
All right. So let me get the banner up here real quick for Streaming Wars. Okay. So if you don't mind sharing my screen. So this is our regular Streaming Wars segment, where we talk about things that are going on in the world of all the different streaming services, all different kinds of interesting news articles and items actually coming out with all different kinds of aspects in terms of how it would affect actually the streaming wars. The streaming wars, of course, directly affects all of us in terms of our pocketbook if you're actually trying to keep up with everything. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm going to have to start making some choices.
Same here.
Cutting some people off. So I have actually for the show, if you don't mind, Eric, I think I might lead off since my screen is already up, and I am going to, I think, lead off with this one. So this is a story that was actually on Variety, and it says Netflix reveals all the TV shows and movies it's removed because of foreign government takedown demands.
Oh yeah, you told me about this. Yeah,
I just thought this was really interesting. So this is by Todd Spangler. This, of course, is on Variety. And it says Netflix disclosed for the first time the movies and TV shows it has. Wow, thanks for doing that. God, these ads, I tell you, they're just a bit much. Netflix disclosed for the first time the movies and TV shows it has pulled from its streaming service at the behest of governments as part of a new transparency report. The 9 titles which Netflix removed between 2015 and 2020 include a single episode of Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Pulled in Saudi Arabia after the government demanded removal of the segment that was critical of the regime. The company said the 9 cases are the only ones it has ever yanked content because of censorship demands since it began streaming in 2007. Other titles purged by Netflix in individual countries included 5 in Singapore alone: The Last Hangover, The Last Temptation of Christ, Cooking on High, The Legend of 420, Disjointed. And in 2017, Netflix pulled George Romero's horror classic Night of the Living Dead in Germany because the film is banned in that country. So I'm not going to read the whole article here, but again, you can find this on Variety. I thought it was interesting, just within the concept of, I guess we could call it censorship. Censorship is one of those things that we don't think about how it's going to affect the streaming wars. But depending upon where you watch content and what things you can or cannot get access to, we have talked about how that's going to affect the streaming wars. So if you can't watch something you want to watch, you're less likely to subscribe. I just thought it was a really interesting kind of thing to talk about in the streaming wars because I understand the foreign governments wanting things removed, and I understand the concept of censorship. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing for those people that are curious to look into it. But again, this was on Variety. Had you heard about this, Eric, that Netflix was taking things down because of censorship?
Not until you brought it to my attention. This is something that I think has been underreported and is very much on, kind of under the radar right now. This is a bad precedent, I think. It's you can understand why they do it, but I am never someone that is for censorship. I'm sitting there scratching my head, like, why the heck does Germany not allow Night of the Living Dead? I mean, that's pretty tame by today's standards. You know what I mean? Trying to think that there's no like Nazi imagery in it or anything like that. Why would they ban that? But anyway, I guess that's sort of a side point. But yeah, anytime censorship happens, I'm not really for it. You know what I mean? I believe very strongly in the concept of free speech, which means even if I hate everything you're saying, and I can tell you I hate everything that you're saying, I still will, defend you with my life, the right for you to say it. That's just my stance. That's what I think free speech is all about. So it's a little concerning. Saudi Arabia in particular has been pretty bad with a lot of censorship and things like that. They have a history of that. And my understanding is it has escalated under the current regime, under the current regime right now in power in Saudi Arabia. There's actually a great documentary about that I think, gosh, I'm going to mess it up. I can't remember which network did that, but there was a network that did a pretty good documentary a few months ago about everything that's going on in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is an important player in these things because they do put money into this stuff. So it's interesting when you see the links between some of these countries and entertainment, because it's not just about the size of the market. For instance, China is the second largest film market in the world, besides the United States, North America. So they obviously have a great deal of influence in that regard. And there have been controversies in China, but in China, generally they just don't show the movie. They're not going to ask you to make changes. They just ban your movie and they just don't let it be shown. So yeah, it's going to be a bigger issue. And the thing with the streaming wars, to tie it back into the streaming wars. The thing is that a lot of these streaming platforms are domestic. CBS All Access is domestic right now. Disney Plus is only, I think, just barely. I don't even know, has Disney Plus even gotten to any new territories yet officially? I think they're still like a month away or something like that from Europe or something like that. Like they're still, or they just started. Because when Disney Plus started, they were not in the UK, they were not in France, they weren't in. The only country they were in was, I believe, the Netherlands, because that was one of their test markets, which is kind of funny. I don't know why they decided that as their test market. They actually got Disney Plus before the United States. but most of the European countries didn't. And as far as I know, most of them still don't have Disney Plus. CBS All Access basically farms out their content internationally, so that they're not even involved in the international distribution directly. Like Picard is through Amazon, and Discovery was through Netflix. So it's going to be kind of interesting how the international market affects the streaming wars, and also apparently their content. Are they going to be sensitive about the fact that are they going to make different versions of all their of content that's offensive, quote unquote, for this regime or this culture or whatever? Or are they going to straight up just not have that content and try to make content that is going to be acceptable all over the world? And then you kind of wonder what's that going to do to creators and all that kind of stuff. So it's a dangerous precedent. It's what I would call a slippery slope.
Yep, for sure. All I'm going to say is yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon. All right. So do we want to do we want to do you have I know you've got stuff for the streaming wars. Do you want to go to one of yours?
Sure. All right.
Awesome.
Let me go. I've got two, so let me start with this one. This one's pretty quick. It's just kind of an interesting tidbit from Bloomberg. This article is dated February 10th this year. It says Amazon, Apple, and HBO hit Culver City to fight the streaming war. The big points of this article are they set up shopping in the California town to be where the talent is, and they're spending billions on content as they fuel a development frenzy. So this is kind of interesting because this is the actual studio space that the big streaming players are starting to acquire and lease in order to provide content. So it says the streaming wars have come to Culver City. It says a century after the pioneers of Hollywood built their studios here, a new breed of entertainment company is transforming this California town just east of Santa Monica into a hotbed for content. Amazon, Apple, and AT&T's HBO are moving into vast office and production spaces in the city of 40,000 over the next few years as they scale up their Southern California movie and TV operations to compete with Netflix, the top video streaming platform. Netflix itself has been expanding in the heart of Hollywood, about 8 miles northeast of Culver City. So basically, all the studios are going to be like, it's going to be like Hollywood again. Apparently, the streaming providers are actually bringing Hollywood back. They're acquiring these studios. They're remodeling them. They're getting them back into shape because they need places to make their content. Its rivals are building their war rooms in the city to tap Los Angeles County's deep resources in the entertainment industry. They've spent billions of dollars in movies and TV shows to steal viewers from Netflix, cable channels, and the very movie studios Culver City was built on. Developers have poured billions of their own into the land rush, converting aging industrial hulks to sleek, creative space. There's a picture of one of the Culver studios right here, which has got this very interesting sort of very classic mansion look. This is one of the old studios, and it's been they're revitalizing it and they're repurposing it specifically for the streaming wars. It says Amazon Studios will lease almost the entire 72,000 square foot Culver Studios complex once it's complete next year, and has already taken all the office space at the adjacent Culver Steps, a recently finished mixed-use development by Hackman Capital Partners. So this is where this is the actual Netflix Amazon Studios is going to be right there, Culver Studios.
Interesting, very interesting. That's cool. I mean, it makes sense that they would have to have some space. I'm always kind of surprised because Robert Rodriguez, he's got his studio out. I think it's out somewhere in Texas. You know what I mean? Where they he's got his I believe like a sound stage. A lot of his own creative professionals are based out of there, and they handle a lot of different productions out of there. Based out of Texas. I'm always kind of surprised, like with in this particular instance, that some of these. I mean, I understand they're just going to occupy these existing facilities and renovate them, but I sometimes wish that they would look beyond, you know what I mean? Just the usual channels, you know?
Oh,
Uh,
I would love to see them build a studio, in Phoenix or something like
yeah,
that. That would be
yeah.
awesome. So they used to do that. Strangely enough, there used to be more studios in Phoenix, and most of them have been torn down. I remember, of all things, it was only a few years ago. Dick Van Dyke had a studio in Scottsdale because he actually had a show here because he was living here at one time. He was living in Carefree, and he was doing a show. And the premise of the show was that he actually was a talk show host based in Phoenix, Arizona. And they built him a studio because he did not want to go back to Hollywood. He was happy out here, and they built him a studio. And I remember a few years ago when they tore that studio down, just tore it down.
Wow.
So, stuff like that happens, all the time. But I do understand, because I think what's going on is a lot of these studios are kind of decrepit, and they're not used very much. So what they're doing is they're saying, let's just take what's already there, renovate it, and just move in. Because it does cost more to build from scratch, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think about, like, as Walmart and some of these other big box retailers have moved out, and they've left these big, huge structures,
Yeah,
that theoretically, someone could move in and renovate and turn it into a functioning studio, and actually, just kind of shoot out of there. I mean, particularly I'm thinking of, like, The Mandalorian. We saw that interesting setup they have, or how they're filming The Mandalorian, where they have that screen that wraps all the way around, instead of doing a green screen, and they just bring the graphics up and then just kind of shoot in front of it, and they're almost, in a weird way, they're almost shooting practically,
right.
with interactive digital sets. I mean, when you look at the probably available space, when you look at, these Walmarts and Kmarts and whatever, that they have these huge facilities, they're just sitting there unused. And then I think about, too, like, in terms of, like, the kind of talent. I mean, you might have to develop the talent a little bit more, but there's so many people who would love to, work in the film industry, and you're probably going to be able to get them to come on board and work, for probably a different scale, and they'd love to just have the opportunity. So
I actually heard Will Wheaton at a panel one time at the Phoenix Comic-Con, and there was a local actor, a local Arizona-based actor, who came up and was asking them, why LA? Why does everybody have to be in LA? And LeVar Burton was on that panel, and so was Jonathan Frakes. But I remember what Will Wheaton's response was that you go to LA so you can work in British Columbia, because all the films at that time were being made in Vancouver.
Right.
And so, it's funny. A lot of that has to do also with the tax incentives and things like that. That's why New Mexico has a studio, and generally the stuff that you'd think would go to Arizona goes to New Mexico, because they actually have the infrastructure, because they have the tax incentives that Arizona doesn't have.
Yeah.
So that Georgia gets a lot of filming because of their tax incentives. There's quite a film industry there. So yeah, it's a combination of factors. You know what I mean when it comes to that. Personally, I'm trying to build a studio here, so there's always me.
Right. Well, I mean, we've had conversations about things, so I would definitely love to. Well, I'm already going to be helping with some things, but we'll get into that soon enough. Stay tuned, everyone. So
Exactly.
yeah, very cool, awesome. So I have one more. If you don't mind sharing my screen, I've got one more. So I thought this was interesting. This is on CBR.com, and it's Future Avengers. What is Marvel's Disney Plus anime? So this is a really interesting article. It's by Carter Burrows. And again, you can find this on CBR.com. They usually do a lot of, over the years, they've done a lot of really interesting reporting, obviously on genre stuff when it comes to comics, but they've been getting more and more into just different forms of media. Obviously, as the movies and the TV shows have taken a stronger presence. So it says the way that anime comes to the United States is pretty simple. When a manga gains traction in Japan and then gets adapted to an anime or anime, if it finds enough success, it's brought over to the United States. Well, the internet has sped up this process to a point where the shows, more often than not come to the United States. Europe and Japan, I am totally butchering this. Let me start over. The way that anime comes to the United States is pretty simple. When a manga gains traction in Japan and then gets adapted into an anime, and then gets adapted into an anime if it finds enough success, it's brought over to the United States. While the internet has sped up this process to a point where shows more often than not come to the United States, Europe and Japan all at the same time. Anime and manga are both traditionally Japanese in origin. This formula, however, was turned on its head back in 2017. Marvel announced that their new show, Future Avengers, would be an anime aired in Japan only. Now, 3 years later, the show will be making its American debut on Disney+. So this is kind of interesting. I apologize for butchering that, but you can read the story on CBR.com. I encourage you to do that. It's just very interesting. This is not, in my mind, the first time that Marvel has had manga or anime-inspired productions. I think about like the Blade one they did several years ago. There was a couple of X-Men ones they did. And I remember there was an Iron Man and a Hulk, and an Iron Man and Black Widow. They've done quite a bit of this over the years. Now, a lot of that content is older. I think it might have been like under that Lionsgate license they had years ago, because Lionsgate was doing a lot of Marvel direct-to-anime stuff. Like they did Ultimate Avengers 2. They did the Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Young Avengers. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they were producing back then. And at that time, it seemed like DC and Marvel were kind of doing kind of similar things. They were just basically rolling their content out, partnering with a studio, and getting a lot of stuff out there, at least in animated form, even if they couldn't get them actually produced live action. So it's not the first time that Marvel's done this, but it's interesting because apparently Future Avengers was a Japanese initial, show. It was designed for that audience and aired there, but now we're going to be able to get the chance to actually, if those of us like myself who haven't seen it, we're going to be able to see it actually on Disney+. I thought this was interesting because I wonder, I've talked about this before, how I feel like that there's a lot of sometimes missed opportunities by taking fun things and then, having them be just like a movie of the week or mini series, type event. DC has tons of this stuff because they've been doing these animated productions for years. So I think this is kind of interesting and fun. Had you? Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I totally even missed this show was even being created, even airing in Japan. Did you know about this show at all, Future Avengers?
No, I did not. I had no idea that they were doing something like this in Japan.
It's really interesting, and I do think that this is probably not the last time we'll see this with the popularity of Marvel, like all over the world. And I'm curious to see whether productions might actually start in other countries. Not just this one in Japan, but I'm wondering if we might eventually see other animated productions, starting, like somewhere like in France or the Middle East. There was that Spider-Man they tried to do years ago, that Indian or Indonesian-based Spider-Man comic they did many years ago.
Oh, really? I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what other interesting takes on characters, and I felt like that kind of idea kind of plays into like one of our things we'll be talking about later in the show. Taking a different spin on a popular character and doing something radically different with it. So I just thought this was kind of interesting. So those of us that have our Disney Plus subscription still and have been waiting for something interesting to watch beyond the Jeff Goldblum show, and hopefully the Mandalorian will return soon. Once you're done, watching, Rocketeer for the 5th or 6th time, and Disney's The Black Hole and Cat from Outer Space, you'll be able to check out hopefully this Future Avengers cartoon soon. I'll check it out. I've enjoyed a lot of the different stuff Marvel's done over the years with their anime productions, primarily the stuff that's aired on television. There was, I think it was Mighty Avengers. That one was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that one. So there's been quite a few of them that have been a lot of fun. Hopefully this will be something fun for us to look forward to.
It kind of gives me hope that maybe one of these days we'll actually see that Japanese Spider-Man live action show. I would love to see that. And in fact, that also kind of ties into there's been rumors that might actually happen in the next Spider-Verse movie. So I'll keep an eye on that too, because that would be kind of cool if they ever did bring back, because it's a totally different take on Spider-Man, completely different take on Spider-Man.
And for those people who have not been watching them, there's these really great, like the Toys Who Made Us and Movies Who Made Us specials actually on Netflix. They're really, really interesting. The one on Power Rangers is actually worth watching because of, ironically enough, I didn't realize a very interesting Spider-Man connection. I might have talked about this on the show before, but that Japanese version of Spider-Man, because he had like a vehicle and a transforming robot, because he combined all these elements together with a superpowered character for the first time, in a weird way, the joining together, transforming robot kind of idea, some of this actually comes from that Japanese Spider-Man live action show. And it directly influenced the creation of Super Sentai, which eventually, when it came to the United States, became the Power Rangers. And I had no idea that Spider-Man's legacy and influence was so large that a lot of the giant combining robot stuff that I loved as a kid, a lot of that actually comes from Spider-Man. If it hadn't been for the live action Spider-Man show, I mean, we would have still probably gotten it in a different form, but it's actually because of the Spider-Man live action show from Japan that we get a lot of this fun stuff. So Spider-Man's legacy looms really large for those of us that are maybe not aware of it. So I definitely recommend the Toys That Made Us. If you haven't seen those on Netflix, they're totally worth watching. Every single one of them is terribly entertaining and fun, even the Barbie one. But the ones I found the most interesting, the ones that had the biggest surprises for me personally, the Power Ranger one was the big surprise, because I didn't realize that there was such a huge connection. I mean, you've got the Japanese Spider-Man show, and you've got Kamen Rider, and then kind of out of those and adding new elements, we eventually end up with Super Sentai and Power Rangers, but also a lot of the giant robot stuff that a lot of us are familiar with. It's interesting how Spider-Man had a hand in that. So I would love to see that reflected in the next one of these Spider-Man productions that Sony's working on, whether it's the next Spider-Verse animated film or one of the live action ones. I would love to see some of this stuff touched upon and expanded upon, because it's an interesting part of Spider-Man's legacy you just don't hear many people talk about.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
So do you have anything else for the Streaming Wars?
I have one more. All right, and this is something that I've been waiting for. All right. All right, this article is from I can't see where it's from. TechCrunch.com. I'm sorry. TechCrunch.com. So it says Nielsen will use Grace Note's smart TV data for ad targeting. So what this article has to do with is that essentially the Nielsen is beginning to track smart TV data to help with ad targeting. And this is related to another article. I just want to briefly mention that one, but the other article here, because it ties into this one here, is that basically that the Nielsen's are finally coming out with some data on the streaming wars. So this article says streaming accounts for nearly 1/5 of total U.S. TV watching, according to Nielsen. So it says streaming eats up a big chunk of viewers' time, though it's still outweighed by traditional linear TV. That's according to the latest total audience report from Nielsen, its first total audience report to use the smart TV data from Grace Note. That's why I wanted to set up the Grace Note thing. And one that's particularly focused on the flashpoint of the streaming wars. The firm reports that among U.S. homes that are capable of over-the-top streaming, 19% of their TV time was spent on streaming during fourth quarter of 2019. Within that streaming time, Netflix accounted for 31%, compared to 21% for YouTube, 12% for Hulu, 8% for Amazon, and 28% for other services. Now, remember, this is the last quarter of 2019, so Apple Plus and Disney Plus came in at the tail end, and they are part of that 28% that you see. But clearly, Netflix has a dominance at 31%. And interestingly enough, their main competitor is YouTube at 21%. They have the largest viewership. It says the Grace Note data also allows Nielsen to analyze the full universe of content available to U.S. viewers. Yes, there's a lot of content out there. The firm concludes that through December 2019, viewers had access to 646,152 unique program titles. Think about that. I mean,
wow.
That's almost 700,000 unique program titles. That's up 10% from 2018. And among those titles, 9% were available exclusively on subscription video on-demand services like Netflix. So we've got some charts here, percent of streaming out of total TV usage. So now again, this is TV. Remember, Nielsen tracks TV, and these are smart TVs. So I should put that caveat on here. So we're talking about data they're getting from this new system they're using to track smart TVs. So we've got your percentage of total streaming out of total TV usage. And right now, streaming only accounts for 19% versus what they call traditional linear TV. And then when you got the video streaming distribution percent by brand, Netflix is out ahead at 31%. Their nearest competitor is YouTube at 21%. But again, remember that this is from the last quarter of 2019. So that 28% does include Apple Plus and Disney Plus, but they weren't around the entire quarter. So I think that's why they don't have their own separate categories. So they just kind of got lumped in with everybody else besides Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, and YouTube. Those apparently are the big players as of the last quarter. So the data coming out this year is going to be different, I'm sure. Disney Plus is going to affect it, and Apple Plus will theoretically affect it as well. But I really like this article because this is something that I've been waiting for. First, I know that a lot of the streaming platforms don't like what Nielsen is doing because Nielsen doesn't look at really at like laptops and phones and things like that. But at the same time, it's good data to have because, like, for me, I watch most of my content on my television screen. I use PlayStation 4, and that's how I stream most of my content. I very rarely watch anything on my computer. I very rarely watch anything on my phone. Not to say that I never do, but it's rare. And I also have a Chromecast, so if I have like an app that I can't get, like the PlayStation 4 or something like that,
right?
I generally will just Chromecast it from my phone, so I'm not watching it on my phone. I think watching on the phone is very uncomfortable. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting as far as what they talked about, where the streaming wars are in terms of TV viewership from the last quarter. And the fact that it appears, at least right now, we can safely say that the major players are YouTube and Netflix, which everybody knew Netflix, I think, already. But the YouTube numbers are interesting to me because we've talked about YouTube's unique position in the streaming wars in terms of being able to have small creator content that they don't have to pay for, other than sharing ad revenue and things like that if a channel is monetized. So it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see as Nielsen continues to collect this data, how Disney Plus, Apple Plus, eventually Peacock, HBO Max. I'm going to be looking at this stuff very carefully as we continue our coverage of the streaming wars.
No, it's terribly interesting, and I'm glad that they're finding a way to actually get some of this data out. For those of us that are independent content creators, while I'm not primarily doing anything right now that's going to be on the streaming service per se, it is nice to know, kind of what's happening in that space, So I'm glad that they are finding a way to get some information out. Yeah, it's just we'll see. It's very it's weird because it makes me think of years ago, in the old days, Diamond Comics distributors, for example, segue into comics for half a second here. Diamond Comics distributors, they actually made public a lot of their sales information. I know they still do it with some of it, but not to the extent that they used to.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because it's a weird thing, because it's the information is essentially it's kind of, they take an issue of Batman and use it as a base, and then if you can extrapolate it, you can basically figure out, what's selling, and it's just I don't know. It's just kind of to me, it's just always been a bit of a weird thing, the way all that works. But years ago, they used to just release all the data. It was just all available. And it was very, as an independent creator, you could look at what people were buying and what they were interested in, and it helped you kind of do a little bit of market research. Like if you're trying to figure out what kind of a comic title to self-publish, you have an idea and you're concerned about, I wonder if people will, support it, or if they will be, interested in it. That information is valuable and important for independent content creators to see what people are, reading and watching, and where they're watching it, and what their interests are. So in terms of determining a winner of the Streaming Wars eventually, it'll be kind of fun, because maybe we can see some of it coming,
Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for. So
yeah,
I'm all about transparency. So, which the studios are not. Just remember that the studios are not about transparency at all. They're about spin. So you always have to take what they say with a grain of salt.
Definitely. Okay, are we ready to move on to topic, or one of our main feature topics this episode?
Yeah, we're gonna start out with Spider-Ham.
Yeah, if you want to. I have, let me pull it up here. I pulled up actually off of marvel.com information here. So we are going to be talking about Spider-Ham #1. This was actually published towards the tail end of 2019 in December. It was written by Zeb Wells, penciled by Will Robson. The cover artist here is Wendell Dollett. It says, "Apocalypse now, not a dream, not a hoax, not an imaginary tale. Spider-Man finally has his own series again. Peter Parker, the spectacular Spider-Ham, finds himself jumping through time, side by side with Peter Parker, the spectacular Spider-Man. Zeb Wells and Will Robson bring you the Ham and Man story you've been waiting for." So I did read this digitally, and then Eric, I think you actually read it as a print copy, correct?
Got it right here. Yep. I am a physical copy guy. Very proud physical copy guy.
I read it digitally. It's just easier for me to pick it up that way. This is the Arthur Adams cover, which is always fun to see Arthur Adams' take on things.
Oh, that's a nice cover.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been a fan of Spider-Ham since I remember seeing it way back in the day. Spider-Ham was one of those comics that was constantly being passed around, like in school when I was younger. Everyone just loved it and enjoyed it. I did a little bit of additional research into Spider-Ham. I didn't realize this, but there's actually an interesting G.I. Joe connection to Spider-Ham. Do you know what the connection is?
To G.I. Joe and Spider-Ham? I'm guessing an artist that worked on both of them or something like that. Is my guess wrong?
Yeah, unfortunately, well, no, not exactly. Actually, Larry Hama is credited as one of the co-creators of Spider-Ham, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't realize that he was it's one of those things when you grow up reading certain comics, sometimes you pay attention to the credits and then other times you don't. And I'd never really paid a lot of attention to the credits for Spider-Ham. I just enjoyed reading them.
Well, one thing I did notice, it's kind of funny that you bring that up. And by the way, Mike mentions that he loves the Art Adams work on the connecting cover. But one thing I thought was interesting is, in the credits, they don't credit a creator of Spider-Ham. I got the credits right here and everything like that. You can see it. They credit Stan Lee and Steve Ditko as creators of Spider-Man. but there is no credit for a creator of Spider-Ham in the book.
I think that all goes back to
I'm glad you just brought up what you were just talking about, because in the book there's no credit.
Yeah. It's one of those things you always like to talk about, where these things, come from, where they originate. I just didn't realize that Larry Hama, which Mike quoted Larry Ham. I was surprised that that Larry Hama had a hand in Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham's one of those characters I've always thought would be fun to actually go back and actually collect the original series, like all of the original comics for.
Bobby says Simpsons did it too.
So very cool. All right, so tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of this Spider-Ham #1 here?
Well, I liked it. I remember, if I recall correctly, my brother had a book. It wasn't a Spider-Ham book, but it was a book where they had like a short Spider-Ham story that was supposed to be like essentially like an ad almost to promote Spider-Ham. That's how I remember hearing about the character, or seeing the character. And I always liked it because I like cartoony stuff. I've mentioned on this show before that my favorite comic book artists are on the extreme ends of art. It's Bruce Timm with the very cartoony, and Alex Ross with the super photorealistic. I'm a man of extremes. And so I always like stuff that has to do with that kind of cartoony fun style. So I enjoy that. I have to say, it's kind of interesting. We were talking about this off the air, but the first 2 pages of this book is actually in the classic original style of Spider-Ham, which is different than the art in the interior book. Like, this is what Spider-Ham looks like inside the book. And it's a very different style than also what the sketch that you were showing earlier. And I really do like the old style. You know what I mean? I do like it better. I like the old style better. But I do appreciate the new style as well. And I also get the fact that it's because they want to tie it into the Spider-Verse, which is why we have this book in the first place. Let's be real. The reason we have this book is because Spider-Ham was kind of a breakout star of the Spider-Verse. My kids loved him. I loved him. A lot of people loved him. I will say, I always kind of go after the comic book industry on kind of bonehead business decisions. This book should have been out like, what, 6-8 months ago? You know what I mean? When Spider-Verse was really, of course, but they didn't know, right? I guess they didn't realize, and again, that's also bad business, right? They didn't understand who the big stars would be, right? They didn't understand. So, it's one of those things where I feel like that's a missed opportunity, because clearly that's why we're getting the book in the first place. It's because of the success of the Spider-Verse movie, and because Spider-Ham was so popular and so well received by fans. So I'm glad he got a book. I'll say that. I'm glad he got a book. So far, I'm enjoying it. I like it. Like I said, I do kind of prefer the original Spider-Ham art style as opposed to the new style, but I understand the new style because it looks more like the Spider-Verse movie. So I'm willing to grant that. I can concede that. I get it. I'm not upset about it. It's just a personal preference.
Right. I honestly, I prefer the original style too, but I did enjoy this story. And I'm not sure, but I think that original art might have actually been by Fred Hembeck. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. If I remember correctly, I think he was the original artist who actually did that opening sequence.
Oh, okay.
He did a lot of that funny Marvel stuff back in the day. It's interesting because Chris Giarrusso does a lot of that fun stuff now. But I think it was Fred Hembeck. Let me.
I see Steve Mueller, Joe. Was it? Is it Albello? Joe Albello, Pierre Fournier. That's who I see credited for those panels in the beginning in the original art style.
Apparently I was incorrect, but it was very reminiscent of his style. It's going to pull up. Well, I don't want to bore everyone with this, but trying to see.
Those first two panels apparently are from Peter Porker, The Spectacular Spider-Ham number 15. That's what's credited in the book.
Yeah, and see, I think of this is part of the reason why I think. Let me get this loaded up right. I think this is why I think of because it's one of those things. I don't remember a lot of credits in the Spider-Ham books, but this image here I've loaded up. It's got the pencils there, Fred Hembeck. So that's kind of who I tend to think of. This is from issue 4. So, but yeah, no. Anyhow, enough about that. Waxing poetic about the past. No. So let's talk about our impressions. Actually, the origin is a fun thing that I think could be entertaining to recap just real quickly. For those people that are not familiar, Spider-Ham's origin is kind of interesting because he is actually a spider that's actually bitten by essentially the Spider-Ham version of Aunt May. She's actually creating some sort of next generation electric hair dryer. It's just weird. It's like a mad scientist.
It's a nuclear powered hair dryer.
Yeah,
it's a nuclear powered hair dryer. That's what she's inventing.
She's going to revolutionize the world with it. She sits in it. She gets zapped by it, and it's almost like a zombie. She immediately goes over and actually bites the spider, and the spider actually turns into a pig. She's like a pig or a ham type character, so he turns into a pig type character. And it's interesting too how they kind of reflect that, because he just kind of stays with her as if he's like, because it's weird because you think of Aunt May and Peter Parker and they're related, but he's kind of like a freeloader, that she wants out of the house, so it's interesting because he's a bug that mutated into a pig as opposed to a pig that was bitten by us. It's weird that it's a complete flip of the whole Spider-Man origin in a sense. But he invents his web shooters. Even though he originally was a spider, he actually invent web shooters because he actually loses an ability.
You're right. He loses the ability to. Yeah, exactly.
He actually loses some powers. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He has to kind of compensate because now that he's a pig, he's lost some abilities. But it's the original origin. I just remember how much I love the classic series. And then as we get into the actual. I guess the biggest surprise for me actually reading this book, because I did enjoy it. It's very well drawn. I like the colors. It very much follows the look and style of the Spider-Verse. So if you like that version of the character, it's very much in that vein. But I did think it was interesting that they have been promoting and selling this book primarily as Spider-Ham's teaming up with Peter Parker, the Spider-Ham and Spider-Man teaming up, right? So I was expecting them to basically run into each other sooner, because basically the whole issue does focus on Spider-Ham, which is good, but we don't actually introduce any elements of the traditional Spider-Man until we get almost basically to the end of the book. So I was kind of surprised at that. So were you surprised at that too, or is it just me?
No, I wasn't. I was surprised that he actually is. I didn't know the premise of the story. Okay, so I bought this book on the cover alone, and the fact that I liked Spider-Ham in the Spider-Verse movie. That's why I bought this. And actually, a funny thing, I think I mentioned this to you also. I didn't go into the comic book shop to buy this. I went into the comic book shop to buy Picard number 3, and they were out. And when I go to a comic book shop, I don't like to just leave without anything, even if I came for something else. I'm like, you know what? I don't go to comic book shop all the time. I'm in one right now. I'm going to look and see if there's anything that appeals to me. And that's why I got this, because the cover appealed to me, and because I really enjoyed Spider-Ham in the Spider-Verse movie. So that's why I got it. So I didn't know. Like, you can see on the cover, but I didn't really pay attention. You can see on the cover that obviously we have the more traditional version of Spider-Man here, but I thought it was just a funny cover. I didn't know that was what the story was. I thought that we were just going to be doing some adventures with Spider-Ham in his universe, which is how this book starts out. So in terms of my expectations, I think the thing that I was most surprised about actually was the premise of what this book is, but also what I liked and was pleasantly surprised with was they showed so many of the other animal people versions of the other superheroes, and I really liked that. I thought that was really neat, because I was thinking about that, because when I was doing some research about Spider-Ham after the Spider-Verse movie, I didn't realize there were so many other characters that were, made into animals and all that kind of stuff and parodied in the book. And you get like all the major ones are in this one. So in terms of like, if you're interested in that and all these different sort of animal people versions of Captain America, of what Hawkeye, of, Mr. Fantastic. I mean, the list goes on and on, like big characters, Iron Man, you get to see the versions of them in his universe, in this animal person universe. You get to see all of them pretty much in this book, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and I do remember them doing a lot of that, because they did versions of all the classic Spider-Man villains, and they did a lot of the important Marvel characters in the original. I do want to apologize, because we are experiencing some slowdowns here and there that everyone's probably seeing in the live stream. We have no control over that. That's almighty interweb doing what it does. But I think my personal favorite, the one that I didn't remember from a kid, is they showed us the sub marsupial. I'm a big Namor the Submariner fan. I'm like actually a big Bill Everett fan just in general. Of course, Bill Everett created the Submariner, going actually back to the golden age of comics. And of course, many years later in the 60s, with Stan Lee, co-created Daredevil. But I just particularly enjoyed the sub marsupial. They referenced Dr. Doom. I thought that was in it. It was a mouse. I thought that was kind of oddly poetic. I don't remember if he was actually a mouse in the original Spider-Ham comic or not. I don't remember. But if he was, that was oddly prophetic when you consider the connections between Iron Man and Walt Disney. When you look at the Iron Man films, because they kind of portray Iron Man's father as sort of being a Walt Disney-like character or personality.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. There's this nice page in the book where they just kind of go through a bunch of the different characters and everything like that I thought was really, really cool, because they give you all the silly names, like the Black Cult, like you said, the Sub Marsupial, Mooster Fantastic,
Right.
Fantastic,
Right.
Yeah, and then Proctor Strange, right? Proctor Strange.
Yeah, he's a crocodile.
So
alligator. Yeah.
I like that stuff. I thought it's fun. It's silly. So
yeah, this was a very entertaining book, and I'll probably be checking out the rest of the series just to follow along with it and see how it goes. Might be fun actually if we finish the series up when it ends, but maybe we might revisit this and kind of talk about the rest of the issues, the storyline as a whole. Because it does end with the introduction of the Spider-Man, the traditional Peter Parker Spider-Man elements.
Right.
So I quite enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. For people that like Spider-Ham or people who actually like the Spider-Verse movie, I think this is definitely worth visiting and checking out, either in digital or print form. And I'm seriously considering, I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and see if I can actually collect a lot of those old Spider-Ham comics. I have a feeling that first issue is going to cost me a lot more than it would have if I'd done that a few years ago.
Last time I looked into it, they'd gone up in price. But that was like right after the movie came out. So
right. So maybe they've equalized out by now. There's certain characters I've always meant to go back and collect a lot of the like early important issues, like Moon Knight, I wanted to do Iron Fist for a long time, but some of those now, because of the Netflix shows and the Marvel films in development, a lot of those have now eclipsed my my price range. But I don't know. I might try and run down these Spider-Ham books just for fun. We'll see.
It would be nice because both Marvel and DC have been reprinting a lot of these classic books, and like I know with DC, they're like a buck. I recently picked up the first appearance of Harley Quinn in comic books, which was actually, ironically, it was in the adaptation of the Batman animated series. So the Batman animated series had its own comic book. That was the first appearance of Harley Quinn in comics. That book is like hundreds, if not thousands of dollars now because it's considered the first appearance of Harley Quinn in comics. But they reprinted it, and I bought it from my daughter the other day, and it was only $1 for the reprint. So it'd be nice if they did something like that with Spider-Ham, if they had some of the older issues and they brought him back with these reprints, because Marvel does this as well, and that we could see them. Like I know they have like the first appearance of the Hulk I saw at one of the stores I was at. I think the first appearance of Wolverine. A lot of those, they're reprinting them. And I think that's very cool. And they're usually cheaper, too, than a standard comic because all the art's already done. You know, they just have to pay whatever residuals or whatever, you know what I mean? So they're generally, the book itself is cheaper. Like I said, the DC one for Harley Quinn was $1.
Right.
And that's a brand new comic book, but it's a reprint. So it'd be nice if they did that with Spider-Ham. I would really appreciate that.
Well, and they do have a trade collection actually for the first, I know they have at least one volume of Spider-Ham, the original series, in a collected volume. So even if you can't actually run down the single issues, you can always go back and actually, you know, get the first the volume one of a trade paperback, you know, collecting at least part of the original Spider-Ham series. And just a reminder here to everyone that's participating in our chat. Everyone that's participating in our chat, you have the opportunity to be entered in, well, not an opportunity, you will be entered into a drawing, actually to possibly win this Spider-Ham sketch that I did. Did this actually this morning. So thank you to everyone who's participating in the chat. If you're watching the show right now or you're just seeing it right now, please, you know, chime in. Let us know your thoughts on Spider-Ham or our next topic here. Please join the conversation, and you'll be entered into a drawing to win this sketch of Spider-Ham.
Very cool.
Awesome.
I did want to mention with the Spider-Ham series, the current one, it's rated teen. I'm not really sure why. I don't know. I feel more and more like teen and PG-13 is like something that companies are doing, perhaps because of COPPA, perhaps to be more trendy and cool, because I don't see why it's rated teen, and I don't see why it would be. To me, this is the type of book that should be accessible to everybody. I had my kids read it. They all loved it. But I just want to point that out, that it is rated teen. I don't really know why. I don't know if you have any insight into that, but I have a feeling like the teen rating has now become like a badge of courage or something like that. Like it's almost like its own little brand now. That, like I said, I don't know if that's because of COPPA. It's something that I'm noticing as I'm reading books and even going to movies. Everything is PG-13, and you're sitting there like, well, why is that PG-13? You know what I mean? But it is what it is. I just thought I would point that out.
You never know. It might have something to do with other issues in the series that we haven't seen yet. Maybe that's why it has that rating. Maybe there's something that happens in a future issue that requires that it be at that. But at the same point, too, you know, there are certain. You know, it's interesting because a few years ago, some of the better of the all ages books, like you mentioned, Harley Quinn appearing in the Batman animated comic that DC was publishing. You know, some of those Johnny DC titles were some of the best books that DC was publishing back then, and those were all considered all ages books. So,
yeah. Mike thinks I'm contributing to the delinquency of a minor. For shame! For shame!
Mike is doing Frederick Wortham proud. We're never going to get past to that. Lord, you know, it's so interesting because, like, in certain countries where comics didn't have the stigma that the Wortham, you know, trials kind of put on comics with, you know, the publication of his book, The Seduction of the Innocent, that albatross still with certain people, you know what I mean? It just hangs around comics in general. I know Mike's playing it for a laugh, but I can't help but think about how that in a sense, affected the industry as a whole. When you look at Japan specifically, with how manga and anime are so pervasive throughout their culture, and I don't mean pervasive in a bad way. I mean just that it's everywhere. That it's a part of their cultural dialogue. Some people complain about how much of this content that we have right now between TVs and movies and streaming and the comics and the graphic novels and everything. And some people feel like that it's beneath us as a society or a culture to celebrate and be so wrapped up in this stuff. But then I go, well, look at it this way. Had the Wertham trials not done the damage that it did, back in the day and caused, the damage it did to the industry, it would maybe be a little bit more integrated, and not seem like so much all at once. Because this is still some of the more fantastical, fun entertainment that all of us can enjoy. This is our fun escapism. So for a lot of us anyway.
And the funny thing is, there's also, I think, a total unintended consequence there that I see with my experience with the comic book industry and having gone to San Diego Comic-Con for years and being around all the industry people and hearing what people were saying. The funny thing I think that also happened was there was sort of a rebellion against the Comics Code Authority. And a lot of artists, they didn't want to be doing children's books. And there was like this pushback among creative types where they wanted to be taken seriously. And what they've done is completely alienated a huge part of the fan base, which was the kids. I was a kid and I loved comics. And I collected comics as a kid far more than I collect them now. I was really into it, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the industry chased the kids away. And it's like, you're killing the generation. It's all going to be guys like my age and stuff like that. I'm trying to get my kids into comics, and my kids do like comics. But you know what? It's a hard sell, and especially if you're being superficial. If you don't know a lot about comics, like say that you didn't grow up on comics. You're a mom or dad, didn't grow up on comics, but you know about Spider-Verse, and you're like, oh, Spider-Ham. You want to pick it up for your kid, and it says teen on it, and you say, well, I guess I'll pass. You know what I mean? So things like that I think there's unintended consequences also that happened from all of that, because I think there was a legitimate rebellion against the Comics Code Authority and this idea that, we don't want to be that. We want to do our own thing. We want to do cool stuff. We want to be like Spawn and be, outrageous and daring and gross and all that kind of stuff. But, that doesn't do well for little kids. And little kids, that's who made this industry. I mean, that's who made the comic book industry, was little kids. So I just thought I'd mention that.
No, yeah, and one item we didn't cover in pop culture news, which is adjacently related to a lot of what you're bringing up right now, is all the stuff that happened with the Harley Quinn film. You have. I still don't understand why they titled it, Birds of Prey, because it has no connection to Birds of Prey, really. That those of us that read the comics, and it adds again to this weird mire and confusion, for some really great source material. And sometimes it feels like we're in such a rush to take these, well, not us. Let me take that a step back. The industry is in such a rush sometimes to take these concepts and push them out that sometimes they're doing a lot of damage. And I feel like the Harley Quinn film, languishing at the box office and this weird nonsense where they're trying to retitle the film because they realize that no one understands what Birds of Prey is, but everyone knows who Harley Quinn is. Why they didn't call the film Harley Quinn in the first place, I have no idea. It makes no sense to me, because it sure as hell ain't Birds of Prey. The first DC film I have not seen opening weekend in the movie theater. The first one since going back to 1978, 1977 was Superman the movie. I have seen every single DC Comics movie opening weekend in the theater. My mom used to take me as a kid because she knew how much I loved all this stuff. All of the Superman films, including Superman 4, all of them. I saw Steel, all of them in the movie theater. The first one I haven't seen was this Birds of Prey mess. I couldn't. And I've heard some people like it, but
I did want to acknowledge Bobby's comment. He says, I rarely see kids in the shop these days. And he adds, that's sad, which I agree with him. It is sad. I usually see them because when I go to a comic book shop, I usually take my kids with me, but I don't see a whole lot of other kids. But the funny thing is with the Birds of Prey debacle, which we did talk about putting it in the show, I had an article ready for that as far as the renaming and all that stuff, but I excised it for time. But at least I guess we could kind of cover it because I did have an article for that about the renaming and the bad branding. And of course, it's like, now they're going to second guess everything because it is a huge bomb, and they're going to try to blame everybody, and they're going to blame everything. But the marketing seems obvious. You're right. It's like Harley Quinn's the most popular character. She was the only one that had been previously established in another film. The list goes on and on and on. But I did have an article for that, but I axed it for time. So
like I said, it's not directly related, but it's kind of adjacently related to what you were talking about the difference between, how content is being marketed and put together and who it's being sold to.
Mm-hmm.
Harley Quinn, essentially was an all ages character that they're selling to an older audience, and they've been doing it for a while. DC repackaged everything in the New 52 to try and appeal to a new audience. But in the process of some of this stuff is alienating the whole audience, and it's not playing well with a lot of people. And I think you see that in what happened with the film, and then you get into, it's like, well, what percentage of that is just marketing, and what percentage of that is just this packaged version of the character isn't working.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you 100% because I'm an old school Harley Quinn fan. I like the where it came from, the animated version and that kind of thing, and that's not what I'm seeing in the live action version. I hated Suicide Squad, so that's a whole other topic. I mean, I hated that movie, so I have no interest in Birds of Prey because I hated that movie. I will concede that Harley Quinn was the coolest, best thing in that movie, but I still hated it. So I have no interest in Birds of Prey.
I enjoyed Suicide Squad in the in the studio retrospective episode. We actually gave Suicide Squad a favorable review, Jan, Mark, and myself. And I enjoyed the film. I had a lot of fun with it. I just found what they did with this spinoff sequel to just be a bit baffling. You have essentially a version of Batgirl who is Batgirl. You have a version of Question who isn't Question. You know what I mean? And then they're saying it's Birds of Prey, but I haven't seen the film, so I apologize for those who've seen it if I seem to be speaking out of turn. But Oracle is such an important part of Birds of Prey. To me, it's more of a female James Bond, than what to me looks more like a Gotham City Sirens kind of approach. Which I think that would have been a better subtitle, Harley Quinn, Gotham City Sirens. But that's just me. So I don't want to dump on the film too much because I haven't seen it. But it's worth noting, in this discussion about all ages material and how things are packaged today. Like I said, not directly related, but adjacent. The weird debacle that went on with the Harley Quinn film, where it's a packaging, marketing, mistake, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Is that good? Do we want to move on to our next main topic?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. I don't think I have the graphic queued up on my end, unfortunately. But we are going to be talking about Star Trek Picard. We're going to be talking about episode 3. I believe at the end is the beginning, which makes you think of that Smashing Pumpkins song from Batman and Robin, which they used in the trailer and the marketing material for Watchmen, which I thoroughly loved. I know some people don't like Watchmen, but I quite enjoyed the Zack Snyder Watchmen film. That's such a great comment. Did you see Bobby Chambers' comment?
Space, the eventual frontier.
That's good.
That's a good sum up. I don't think we need to say anything.
Yeah,
that's a good sum up.
That's got it right there.
Bobby, you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Space, the eventual frontier. Man, that really does sum up my thoughts on this episode very well. Bobby, you hit it. You hit it out of the ballpark as far as I'm concerned.
And a great example of packaging something and selling it where everybody gets it like that. That of course, I don't think they'd want to use that as the tagline for this show, the eventual frontier.
Probably not. Probably not. We'll get to Chabon's comments when we get into spoiler
Yes.
territory. We'll get into his stuff, the stuff that I'm going to nitpick to death, and his responses. But let's start out, Dave. Overall impressions. What do you think?
Just like the last one, I saw no reason to rewatch this. So I watched it one time. I liked it better than the last episode. I enjoyed seeing Picard in uniform for the little bit at the beginning. I feel like that we haven't spent, like, we kind of know a little bit about this Raffi character because we read the Countdown comic. But even in the Countdown comic, they didn't spend a lot of time with her. And then I watched, well, we need to stay with initial impressions. Good. We were discussing, but not great. We were discussing that we hope that maybe this third episode, like if you could see all three of them in one sitting, it might bring it together a little bit better. I didn't hate it. It was okay. I'm just having a hard time processing the idea that Starfleet is the enemy. I'm just having a hard time with that at the end of the day. I mean, you can see all the gray hairs in my head. I'm obviously an old dude. So I'm just having a hard time with the concept of Starfleet as the enemy. So that my whole initial impression was it was good. I'm still going to continue to watch it because I want to see what they're going to do. But based off these 3 episodes, I don't know. It's both interesting and dismaying at the same time for me. Maybe by the end of the season, I'll feel differently about it. We have we don't get into it, but that's my initial thoughts. What were your initial impressions of this episode of Star Trek Picard?
Well, my initial impression is it's better than episode 2. That was the one thing, because I was so upset with episode 2. I felt a little bit of relief with this one because I felt this was better than episode 2. Comparing it now to episode 2, I can almost now say, yeah, I hate episode 2. Episode 3 is not that bad. You know what I mean? Because one of the things we talked about before and has become very obvious, the premiere, the official premiere that was done, that the cast and crew attended and all that kind of stuff in Hollywood, London, they did the first 3 episodes, and it's very clear the first 3 episodes are a story. You know what I mean? One of the problems with this trend towards serialized storytelling, and we've talked about this off the air, is in my mind, you end up slacking on certain episodes because you're trying to tell the story. And Picard is a great example of the pitfalls of that and how it can really screw an episode up, and also how I think the limitations of serialized storytelling in the quote modern era and in Star Trek. What happens is, you've always had quote unquote throwaway episodes in Star Trek, but at least they were always a coherent story. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. When you do serialized storytelling, you tend to lose that a little bit. And I think Picard is suffering from that because Picard episode 2 is very much sort of a middle episode. This episode, there's so much going on. Like I'm almost afraid of how if I'm going to be able to review it properly because it jumps around so much, and it has so much stuff to kind of get done. Because basically we have 2 episodes of setup, episode 1 and 2, and this is the first episode where something actually happens, for lack of a better term, like where we actually get somewhere. And now the story seems to be actually moving. We hope, because apparently the team is not together completely yet. That's like a little bit of a spoiler, but not really, because this episode is really about collecting the crew, if you will. But apparently the crew's not all collected yet, and we're in episode 3. But I will say, when you take episode 1, 2, and 3 together, yeah, there's a story there. Individually, they have a lot of flaws, a lot of weaknesses, a lot of problems. Again, because of the limitations of serialized storytelling, at least in this context. I think there are ways you can make it work. I was thinking about comparing this show to The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian, at times, I was kind of confused because I didn't quite understand the format. And now I realize what The Mandalorian was doing was they were combining the episodic and serialized format together. So you would have an episode that was clearly part of the larger story of Baby Yoda, but then you'd have an episode that was essentially just a side quest and really had no implications to the larger story at all. And when I think about it, I'm kind of like, I think I like The Mandalorian's approach better than Star Trek Picard so far. I remember that this was pitched as a 30-hour movie. That's the way this was pitched, was that this is going to be like a 30-hour movie. It's going to be 3 seasons to tell the entire story because it's going to be 10 episodes each season. Of course, it's not going to be quite 30 hours because, interestingly enough, these are not hour-long episodes, which is another gripe of mine. I don't understand that. I had that gripe with The Mandalorian, too, that the episodes are too short. But the Mandalorians are even shorter than these. But I think there's some definite problems. Everybody, for whatever reason, the serialized storytelling has become all the rage in genre entertainment. I think Game of Thrones has a big reason to do with that because of the massive success of Game of Thrones. But I'm seeing the limitations here, and I'm seeing the problems, especially for Trek, when you're doing this kind of format. Because just like Bobby said, space, the eventual frontier, and that's what this story feels like. If you go through parts 1 through 3, it takes a long time to get to the point where I want to be at. Which in any other Star Trek show, we're already in space in the first episode, and this is called Star Trek. Okay, this is Star Trek. So the fact that it takes us 3 episodes to get into space, and I guess that's also a little minor spoiler. I don't think that's a big one. It's a little minor spoiler. But, I mean, yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of that at all.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's just one of those things that how this episode started, I just kept thinking about, we would have started in uniform on a ship, you know what I mean, in a normal Star Trek story, from, frame 1. Well, we did. Frame 1, scene 1, we kind of did with that flashback sequence.
I've got the image up there right now, so that's the best image of the show, in my opinion. That's why I have it up there. And in this particular image, you can even see Hugh in the background there too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna watch it because I was excited for it, and I want to finish it. And there's they can still pull it together, and this could still be interesting. At the end of the day, there's a lot of intrigue with what they're trying to do. So I'm curious to see how it will unfold. But I can also see too about what they were talking about, how this is not Next Generation. This is not your usual Star Trek show. It's more of a drama than action adventure, which I don't mind that, but yeah, we spent a lot of time, before we kind of get at least some of the people assembled on the ship. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. We just spend a lot of time with Picard reflecting on the vineyard, just overall. And I think 1 episode of that could have been enough. But I don't know if we needed 3.
Right.
But so that's definitely
actually we go from reflecting at the vineyard to reflecting in the trailer park. That's what happened in this episode. Right. So I didn't really need any of that, to be honest with you. I didn't need it at all. So yeah. Do we want to get into spoilers?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get into spoilers. And then here real quick, let's see. I was trying to figure out. So this is that one, and then yeah. So just real quick, I was doing the drawing. The drawing for the drawing. So just real quick, we'll do this and we'll get into spoilers. So just a reminder, this was the item that was up for just have a hard time getting this in frame because it always works backwards. This is the item that we had for our people who are commenting in the chat, and the winner of this sketch was Bobby Chambers. So congratulations, Bobby. We will. I'm going to button that up with the other one. Like I said, I'm running a little behind on getting stuff in the mail because I needed some top loaders to put the cards in because I was concerned about the post office trying to origami them into like a duck or a boat. Those should be coming in soon. So I will just put this in with your sketch card that you won on a previous episode. So congratulations. All right. So let's go ahead and get back into the. Okay, here we go.
Bobby had a comment that the best part for me is watching the interaction between the crew. I agree with you, Bobby. Hey, come on. That is the essence of Trek for me with Spock, Kirk, and McCoy. It's the interaction. That's what makes that show even more than anything else. So then he says 3 hours later, and we're just getting there.
Yeah.
Exactly, Bobby. Yeah. You're so correct, and you're exactly on the same wavelength as me in terms of that thought. And also he is he's happy about about the prize there. So.
Well, and Bobby makes a good point because I kind of liked the roguish Han Solo ex-Starfleet guy that we met, the guy who actually has the ship that they eventually wind up on. I kind of like the doctor lady too. Like I find her the synthetic research scientist lady. Maybe she's not a doctor. You know what I mean? Like there's quite a few of these characters I found very interesting. The one character I'm hoping is going to grow on me is actually the Raffi character. I watched the Ready Room episode after this with Will Wheaton, and she just spent tons of time talking about this character and how excited she was for it. And then I was thinking back in the episode, and I'm like, well, I remember seeing you vape something. I'm hoping as the show goes on, they're going to give us some flashbacks, so we're able to better relate with her character's struggles. We understand there's bad blood between
I'll
her
be
and
honest.
Picard, but
I'll be honest. The Ready Room did not help the case for Raffi, in my opinion. I've enjoyed watching the Ready Room with Will Wheaton. Obviously, I don't know the actress's name that plays Raffi, but she was the featured person on the Ready Room, and she talked a lot about the character and what her thing is and all that stuff. And I'll tell you, I feel like in another context it might be fine, but in Star Trek, she just doesn't get it. She just doesn't get it. And it's disappointing for me to see Will Wheaton, because I know he's a fan besides being a member of the cast. I've met Will Wheaton at conventions before. I've talked to him before. To not at least call her out a little bit. And I realize that's probably not his thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it's one of those things. I think he's brought in to be the enthusiastic cheerleader. You know what I mean? And everything's good. Everything's wonderful. And it's always going to be softball questions. It's always going to be nodding yes, no matter what they say. They could talk about their admiration for Hitler, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I get it." You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? That's like, he's not going to challenge anything. We can start at the beginning, with this image of the flashback to Starfleet Academy, okay, and instantly this character, when there's this beautiful image that I have up right now of them in uniform, which we're not going to get any more of this. This is like the little fan service fun thing that we get as hardcore Star Trek fans, to see them in the new uniforms, the ones we saw them in the Countdown comic, because you and I actually read the Countdown comic. It's awesome getting to see Patrick Stewart in that uniform at least once. You know what I mean? And what is this scene? It's so depressing. It's so dire. It's so not Star Trek. Her cursing. I'm really sick of the cursing already. You know what I mean? Like it takes you out of it. The bullshit line. Come on. You know what I mean? She's supposed to be a Starfleet officer at this point. This is an admiral, and she's like a lieutenant commander or commander, depending. In the comics, she's a lieutenant commander. I can't tell the rank in this one, but she's a subordinate. And she's cursing at him. all the JL stuff, which I hated in the comic book to begin with. Seeing it on screen just made me cringe, the whole JL thing, because that's lazy. We all know what the JL thing is. The JL thing is a lazy writing construct to make us realize, oh, Picard and this lady are tight. We've never seen this lady before, but hey, dumb audience, they're tight because she calls him JL. That's what that is, right? I mean, that's exactly what that is. It's a lazy construct so that the audience is like, oh, I get it. They're good friends. The fact of the matter is, she is a subordinate to him, And by the way, Chabon did address this. So when we get to the Chabon comments, this is one of the things that were brought up. But it's like, I don't know. It just, this scene to me should have been so much fun, because this is like the only one we get to see where they're in Starfleet and all that stuff. And instead, it's just a very dark, depressing scene. And right off the bat, I'm already disliking Raffi because I don't feel like she fits in Star Trek.
Well, and in the Ready Room, they go out of the way to talk. She talks about the fact that she likes the idea that this isn't the kind of character you would normally see in Star Trek. And we've seen drug addicts, we've seen people with substance abuse problems before. It's not like this because here's the thing, okay? If she was a Starfleet officer struggling with this stuff, which again, we have seen this before in Star Trek, but maybe there's an argument to be made for that. But as far as just in general Star Trek characters suffering with substance abuse problems, we've had whole episodes about that. Like, whole pivotal episodes. So, the Ready Room thing did, because I was hoping that through that I would have a different perspective on it. But her character just seems to be really angry at Picard. And, I don't know. Her was the one character. I mean, maybe it'll turn around by the end. But as it currently stands, I mean, it's not that I hate her character. It's just, I just don't feel like they're doing anything terribly interesting with her character. Now, along the same lines, talking about drama that's terribly compelling, I might want to mention, my wife and I have actually been watching The Crown on Netflix. And that is a terribly interesting drama where people are just mostly just around talking with interesting situations. And this episode of Picard was not compelling from just a dramatic standpoint. The two of them sitting outside of Starfleet headquarters going, I gave them an ultimatum. What did they say? No. What happened? I resigned. Damn you. Okay. I don't know. It didn't really, I mean, if this episode had started off maybe with something like from the comic that we read, where Picard was locked up, you know what I mean? And she broke him out or something. And the flashback had a little bit more substance to it than just the two of them sitting in a courtyard going, well, everything's gone to hell.
I just want to mention, I always say when it comes to, licensed comic books, when it comes to comic books that are basically a spin-off of a television show or a movie, that kind of a thing, you always have to take them with a grain of salt. And the reason being is that the directors, the producers of the show, probably don't read the comics, definitely don't care about the comics, and will do whatever they want anyway. The Picard Countdown comic was kind of like marketed as a like that's our first taste of Picard. This is like this is canon. This is going to give us a backstory. It does talk about Raffi's in it, so we get to kind of see what the relationship is. But in this first scene, the premise is basically that Raffi suspects a Tal Shiar plot in the destruction of the Utopia Planitia shipyards. And Picard completely dismisses it. Well, and he dismisses it on the basis of, why would the Romulans blow up the ships meant to save them? Which is logical, except if you read the Countdown comic, the Romulans were totally irrational. They actually betrayed Picard, tried to take over his ship, and then the Tal Shiar was actually trying to blow up his ship. So already the comic has become meaningless. You know what I mean? Because if they had just had a little line like whatever that planet was, the colony, and if Raffi had just said, "Don't you remember?" blah blah blah, just a little throwaway line for the comic book, and then Picard could be like, he could say something. If they want to dismiss it, it'd be like, "Well, that was a little bit different situation. I just don't think, blah 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 blah." But no. So already it's like the comic book is already worthless because it could have tied into this scene very well, this opening scene, and they could have kind of talked about all they have to do is put that little Easter egg for people who read the comic and say, well, don't you remember, that planet, whatever the name of it was, the Romulan colony they were trying to evacuate. And then because in the Countdown comic, exactly what Picard is saying, oh, well, the Romulans would never do this. That's exactly what they do in the comic book. They sabotage their own rescue mission. Literally, is what they do in the Countdown comic book, is they sabotage their own rescue mission.
And that's kind of the thing. I mean, it's just this. I don't know. I mean, because Picard could have mentioned, when she said, "Well, I suspect that Tal," he said, "Oh, did what happened on the Verity give you a clue?" Because they tried to blow. I mean, just one. And he could have kind of snickered a little bit, and then we would have realized that they both know, obviously, the Tal Shiar is behind what's going on. But no one. Then it makes the fact that no one believes them even worse, because then you realize, well, wait a minute. If the Federation understands that the Tal Shiar tried to destroy the USS Verity, plus they imprisoned Picard on this planet with Raffi, then they're definitely turning a blind eye. They're just turning a blind eye. They don't want to get involved. They suggest or imply that there's elements within the Starfleet and the Federation that would just assume let the Romulans die anyway. Which is, it reminds me of that that moment in it was Kirk in
Star Trek 6.
Star Trek 6.
Let them die.
Or Kirk, yeah.
Let them die.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that. So, the idea that some people would feel that way in Starfleet, I wouldn't have any issue with that, because we have. See, that's the thing. They make it out like we've never seen this kind of stuff before. That this is breaking new ground in Star Trek. And that's what I keep coming back to. It's like, we've explored the idea of people harboring, bad feelings, potentially racist, or specious, how we look at tendencies, with different groups of people. And we explore that concept in Star Trek 6, the idea of a character suffering from addiction. I mean, how many different ways did we explore that just in Next Gen alone? Whether you want to talk about the weird little game that shot the things into their eyes, or remember there was I think it was season 1, talking about going back to the Star Trek films, the guy Judson Scott, who played Khan's implied son or whatever on Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
He was in that episode.
Next Gen, that was the drug episode, essentially. Yeah, exactly.
They keep acting like we've never seen these concepts explored before, and I'm like, well, we have.
Well, here's the thing, if you want to be respectful to Trek, and there's a line later in this. Oh, there's so much to get through with this too. We got to go forward in the episode because I'm just stuck right here right now. But the thing is, if Raffi had been an alien. You know what I mean? And she's not a human being. Then you know what? She can have all the addictions she wants and all that kind of stuff, and you can explore that path as much as you want. The whole point is that humans are supposed to be beyond this. We talked about this with our review of the City on the Edge of Forever comic book, and one of the big reasons that comic book did, that original teleplay didn't go forward was because they had a member of Starfleet who was a drug dealer, and Roddenberry said, no frickin' way. That is not the future that I want to present. We're not doing that. And he was right. That's what makes Star Trek unique. It's the idea that humans have evolved beyond those kinds of things, But you can still have an alien doing that. That's fine. If you want to go down that path and you want to show this struggle with addiction and all that kind of stuff, because apparently that's what the actress is really into. That's what she said in the Ready Room. She wants to present that. That's fine. You can do it in Trek. Just don't make it a human being. You know what I mean? Just make it an alien, because humans are not supposed to be like that. That's the idea. That's the idea in my head. That's the idea. You can still explore that. You can still have that character. Just don't make it a human.
And here's the thing I don't understand too. She's living like in this trailer, like out at the Vasquez Rocks, right?
Yeah, the trailer park. I mean, what the hell was that?
And I'm trying. We've kind of established that the economics of the future is different because this is not removed too many years from next gen. So it's like, well, hasn't she chosen to live at this trailer out
exactly.
at the Vasquez Rocks?
I hated that line where she was like, "Oh, well, you were just been at your chateau and all that kind of stuff." It really like is like it's really like a little bit of like almost like class warfare. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, look at the way you live and the way that I live. And like you said, in the context of Star Trek, she chose to live that way because in Star Trek, we know that the economics are supposed to be different. And the fact of the matter is, there is no poverty in the world, in Earth. They've said that a million times in virtually every single iteration of Star Trek that's been emphasized, that was one of the big things that Earth did. That's one of the big differences with humans is they don't suffer from poverty. They don't suffer from homelessness. They don't suffer from a lack of food. Everything is in abundance. Cisco in Deep Space Nine, which is one of the darker Star Trek, said Earth is a paradise. The reason that they don't understand, the Maquis, the reason they don't understand, the demilitarized zone situations, because they look outside and it's paradise. So they can't conceptualize the problems on the frontier. But this lady lives in a trailer. Raffi lives in a trailer.
And this honestly, in my mind, this goes all the way back to the idea that we're just stuck on Earth for too long. If she had been living on some Federation colony and she was in this situation, perfect, and Picard goes out there to bring her on, he's like, I need you on this mission because of what happened with us and the Romulans, and this will give you a chance to, kind of redeem yourself in Starfleet's eyes. And again, if this had been applied with a more classic Trek structure, and he could be helping her to kind of redeem herself, and because of what happened, maybe she was isolated and alienated, and she didn't feel like she fit in, and she's on this planet somewhere living in this, Federation, cargo hold trailer thing or whatever. And she's ashamed. She feels like she can't go back, or whatever, and she does have an addiction. There's a way you can explore that idea.
No, that's perfect.
Move it on Earth.
Just put it on a different planet. It's a colony. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's makeshift. Perfect. Done. And now it's fine. Instead, they just assaulted another huge tenant, another huge pillar of Star Trek has been assaulted in this show. And I don't appreciate it. I do not appreciate it. And the irony is, they actually in the episode they talk about this idea of a shared narrative framework that supposedly the Borgified Romulans need for therapy. It's this really weird idea, right? But the fact that they use that terminology, the shared narrative framework, I felt like that was such a huge slap in the face to like hardcore fans be like, wait, you don't think I see what you guys are doing with our shared narrative framework? And you're actually going to put that in the episode? As if I didn't notice that, that you actually are saying that. That's the kind of stuff that just, because remember, I always come from a lore perspective, world building perspective. Continuity is important to me. Those kinds of things, and that kind of stuff just makes me insane. I can't stand that kind of stuff. It's like if you want to play in the Star Trek world, just follow a few little rules here and there. And you can do what you want. And if you want to do something different, well, don't do Star Trek. You know what I mean? Because you're not doing Star Trek at this point. So, yeah, I had to say that with the shared narrative framework remark, which we hadn't got to the Borg cube yet. But the problem with this episode is it jumps around all over the place. Once we actually get past this scene, it's jumping from the chateau to the ship to then we have the assault on the chateau, and then we're on the Borg cube, and it keeps going back and forth, and it's kind of a messed up narrative, really.
Right. Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't understand. There's a lot of things in this episode that just kind of I didn't understand what they were trying to do. Now, to emphasize that concept. Oh, okay. Go ahead and read Bobby's comment.
Said he says, is the obvious pandering to the younger crowd taking precedence over the things that always made Trek successful? And it's a question. He's talking about things like vaping and cursing, and that's, absolutely, I think it is. They're, and I don't even know if they're pandering to a younger crowd necessarily, because I think there's even an older crowd out there that's never gotten Star Trek and that's never liked it. And this show is made for them. You know what I mean? It's like this show is made for people that hate Star Trek. It's made by people who hate Star Trek for people who hate Star Trek. I'm talking about Kurtzman in particular. I'm not talking about Chabon. I will actually have kinder words for Chabon, even as we talk about his comments. But Kurtzman has gone on record saying he doesn't like Star Trek. Never did. And it's very clear, you know what I mean, in this kind of stuff. So it said the formula is taking a back seat, and I agree. I think the what makes Star Trek is very much absent from these shows so far. Very much absent from this story so far. The pillars are not there. They're just not. You know what I mean? Now, to be fair, as much as I disliked episode 2, and I said as much as I disliked episode 2, there were some things I actually kind of enjoyed, or at least found a little intriguing in this episode. And Dave, I think you actually touched on it earlier. You were talking about the pilot,
right?
The pilot of the ship.
Before, because I do want to get into positive things, but I do want to point out something else that I thought was a little odd. If you could share my screen, I want to point something out. Okay, so on my screen right here, what I have, this is an image of Lieutenant Jessie Supernova Star. She is a character that's going to be in Volume 2 of Red Skirts. She is a fighter pilot. There's actually, you can't see it, but actually here, this is actually her fighter spacecraft. Although they're going to look different in the show, but she's got a helmet, but she's a fighter pilot, kind of akin to Battlestar Galactica. Okay. We put sunglasses on her because pilots sometimes wear sunglasses, so we thought it'd be funny to put aviators, because this is a humorous series, because why would she be wearing aviator sunglasses in space on board a, you know what I mean? It's kind of silly, right?
Exactly.
Did the sunglasses thing bother you too, or is it just me?
That took me out of it so bad. I mean, we all know that Vulcans have like 2 eyelids. They live on a planet with like 3 suns, and they don't need sunglasses. But the other thing is, what other people were talking about was they even look like cheap sunglasses. What I thought that was, I think clearly what that was an MIB reference that a lot of people would understand and be like, oh, she's the head of Starfleet security, so she's like a man in black. I swear that's exactly what they were thinking. That's actually, Chabon addresses that in the video that I plan to show. So Chabon, people asked about that for sure. They were like, "What the hell is that?" But yeah, but the problem is, if you're into Trek, you understand Trek. If you're a big fan, stuff like that takes you out of the show, and you're like, "Am I in the future, or am I like sitting here right now?" And I would say every single character so far, including Picard, reacts like a contemporary American, not even like we're not even talking about other cultures or anything on our own planet. They all act like Americans on this show. They react like Americans. They talk like Americans. Even the ones that have accents, by the way, because we have some Irish accents in this show, British accents in this show, they still act like Americans. Nobody acts like there's any other cultures or alien races. Everybody seems to act like contemporary Americans. And it's like, geez, whose fault is that? Is that the director's fault? Is that just the dialogue? I mean, what is it? I mean, there's a clear tone here that is so contemporary, it just totally takes you out of the narrative.
Yeah, there was just a lot of things. The cursing doesn't bother me as much as it probably should. But there's just all these other sort of weird surface things: the vaping, the sunglasses, just this other stuff. And I I wish they would think more like if you want to contemporize it, like if they feel that's necessary. I wish they would look more at what they're doing, with the story, with the characters themselves, and just finding a way to do it where it just doesn't seem as off-putting.
Well, maybe they should do something instead of Star Trek, is what I say. You know what I mean? So that
Possible.
to me, at this point, I feel like they're just using the name. But we've hit so many of the things that Chabon talked about. I'm gonna put up the Chabon comments for you, because you know what, I do appreciate him actually taking the time to address some of this stuff. I don't necessarily like his answers, but here we'll go through this because he addresses some of the stuff we've just talked about. So the first one we got here is, you're a Star Trek fan watching Star Trek Picard. You have questions. All right, first right off the bat, what's the deal with Commodore O's sunglasses? Everyone knows Vulcans have evolved an inner eyelid to protect them from the intense glare of their homeworld's 3 suns. Chabon's response. What, therefore,
might we logically infer?
Question mark.
That she's Romulan?
I don't know. Even if she's Romulan, I still think those are cheap sunglasses.
I would assume that they're saying that she's not Vulcan. She's something. I kind of half thought that for half a second, but I just.
So the other thing is the vaping. So is Raffi vaping? Please tell me Raffi is not vaping. So it explains. Raffi is using a traditional Orion flash pipe known as a Hargle. It's been employed for centuries on that world to sublimate the fleshy tendrils of an intoxicant plant known as, I can't even read that. Look, the name. Popularly, it's called snake leaf. That's what she calls it. She calls it snake leaf in the episode. Raffi calls it snake leaf.
Right.
So I don't know how that really answered the question. He's just giving this sort of, I guess, weird in-universe explanation that this is apparently a drug that's popular with the Orion Syndicate. And of course, we know the Orion Syndicate are not really good people. They're pirates. So I guess that's what that's supposed to be about. So
which again, if she was off-world on some
that makes sense, right? Yeah.
Where they're again, because Picard could have hopped on a Federation ship to get to an outpost because he's got to get to a non-Federation ship. And it's
or she could be staying in an Orion-controlled world. You know what I mean? Then people get it. Oh, the Orions are criminals. Blah blah blah. I get it. That makes sense now.
She's a pirate. She has connections to this pirate guy. They're going to use his ship. Clearly, they're not Federation, but
right.
It's a Starfleet. There's a different way to still get here without making it seem so. I don't know.
So then we got another person going back to sunglasses. Says, okay, but sunglasses and vape pens, and then they actually crossed it out with what he called it, which is a Horgle. I guess Horgle is what he calls it,
right,
in the universe. And like Girardi uses earbuds. He says, even if people still use those things in 2399, that's the year, shouldn't they all be more, futuristic? So here's Chabon's response. And you can tell Chabon's a good writer with his response here. So it says, okay, you know what? We actually thought about that a lot. When you are making a show that's set in the future, you have to ask yourself constantly how people will be meeting daily needs and performing everyday tasks. And I would say, actually, you don't, but that's what he's focusing on here. Says so. One guiding principle is that some fundamental objects and tools evolve in ideal form. He's showing a knife, for instance, there, and a bottle of wine. Efficient, economical, comfortable, durable, practical, effective, and useful. And afterward change very little, except as subject to fashion, which itself is often retrospective. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, that is true. There are some classical things, although I would say in the context over the time period we're talking about, maybe not so much. But anyway, he's giving examples like this, like a wine bottle, a knife, books. They haven't changed a whole lot over time. That's his premise there. Certainly, any human civilization in which all the objects and appearances of everyday life were brand new, of recent invention, and thoroughly contemporary in design would be truly unprecedented. Except that's exactly what we have in Star Trek. In Star Trek, that's the way the aesthetic has always been. There's also another thing to think about here, which is, you're like, okay, Chabon, how much Star Trek do you actually know? Civilization was wiped out at one point in the Star Trek world. The Star Trek world, they had World War III and basically destroyed the planet and almost killed everybody themselves. Okay? So a lot of that past stuff is gone. You know what I mean? I always thought it was kind of weird that the Golden Gate Bridge survived. Like, that's something that I thought about, in my head, is how the hell did the Golden Gate Bridge even survive that nuclear war and devastation and everything like that, But in the context of Star Trek, first of all, we've always had new objects that aren't contemporary. That's exactly the style of Star Trek from the beginning, especially the original series, actually. Ironically, the oldest show was the one that was like the most different, and we never hardly ever saw anything that was contemporary. And then you talk about this idea that, it would be unprecedented human civilization. Not if human civilization was essentially wiped out. You know what I mean? If we had this massive nuclear war, guess what? There wouldn't be a whole lot of old stuff left, would there? So it's like, okay, hey, he's trying at least. I'm just not buying what he's selling. All right, so we have this character, which actually, this character is probably one of the most intriguing to me personally. He says, okay, but what about Rios's tobacco habit? One thing we know for sure about the future Star Trek is that humans have at least come to their senses about this particular unhealthy and obnoxious practice. It's like, yeah, you really would not think in the Star Trek world that they would still use tobacco. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He says, yes, but here's the thing about Rios. He studiously maintains a lot of seemingly outmodeled habits, practices, and pursuits, many, but by no means all of them connected to his ancient Latin American heritage. All right. Okay. I'm just going to call a spade there. That's like a racist comment. That's basically saying that you're enhancing a racist stereotype that, Latinos and Hispanics all smoke. That's essentially almost what he's saying there. Okay. Are there a lot that do? Like, you have the Cuban cigar thing? Yeah, that's a big thing, right? I mean, it's undeniable. But that's a stereotype. That's a stereotype. That's what that is, right? I mean, I don't know how else you interpret that, but that's basically what he's saying is, hey, it's Latinos, they smoke, right? They smoke cigars. And so then he does this. Would you believe synthagars? That, just like synthahol? I'll give him that. At least he was clever and tried to come back after that and said, okay, Would you believe that they're synthegars, like synthahol? You know what I mean? There's no
but
addictive property. And by the way, no, we wouldn't believe that because that's clearly not the case. The guy is like has a shard of like metal in his arm and he's smoking and drinking to dull the pain. You know what I mean? No, it's not a synthagar, but at least he understands that much about Star Trek.
Well, and I was just gonna say it's like, well, in a sense, isn't that what vaping is? Like, it's theoretically, that's what vaping was
well,
generally sold
you can't
as.
even say that now because you're going to offend somebody by saying that because now people are saying vaping is terrible and the worst thing ever. And who do you believe?
But,
you know what I mean? So,
but it was sold when it was originally marketed and sold as an alternative to smoking that's not as unhealthy. So
correct.
vaping is essentially the synthagar or synthagol or whatever. Like that's what vaping theoretically is. So it's like, shouldn't he be vaping just like Raffy's vaping then? Like if it's a synthetic thing, will there be? And then there's a commonality. It's like, hey, they both vape together. Maybe they're friends. They're vaping buddies. I don't know. I don't. Yeah.
So I'll let the folks. I will provide a link for this when I edit the videos later. By the way, Bobby Chambers says face palm. I agree with you. I mean, I don't know. I think Chabon is a good writer. I really do. I don't think he's a terrible writer or anything like that. I mean, he won a Pulitzer Prize, so I'm not going to sit there and say he's a hack. But that doesn't mean he's a good television writer. Doesn't mean he's a good showrunner. Doesn't mean he understands Star Trek. So
and I'm just going to say his show Unbelievable on Netflix is really, really good. So he is a good writer. He's a talented writer, and he might love Trek. But whenever you're involved with properties, and you know this as well as I do, Eric. Whenever you're involved,
can you go back because I lost you for a second and I didn't hear what you were saying about Chabon. So
I was just gonna say his show Unbelievable on Netflix is really, really good, and I highly recommend people check it out. It's very good, especially if you love things like Mindhunter. Like if you enjoyed Mindhunter is a great show on Netflix. That's not one of his shows, but he is a showrunner and he did write several episodes of Unbelievable. It's a very, very good show. So he is a talented writer, and I know from Unbelievable that he is a talented showrunner. But all I was just going to say is that I know personally, and I know this, this as well, Eric, that whenever you have a valuable property and, there's a lot of different people have a stake in it, even though you may write something or you may create something, by the time the final form ends out on the other side, it may not even been what you originally intended in the first place.
Well, we know that's the case with Chabon. We know he said that's the case, that his initial pitch was thrown in the garbage. Those were like his words. His pitch that got Patrick Stewart to do this show, they threw it in the trash. And he said none of that stuff made it into the show. That's what he said on the Ready Room.
Yeah. And seriously, I mean, this is such a simple fix in my mind. Picard needs to get on a non-Starfleet Federation ship. He hitches a ride to an outpost. We get him in space faster. He goes to basically it's an off-world colony, and off of Earth. I mean, like some colony planet, right? And he's there. They're on the fringe of something. Obviously, Romulan space would make sense, right? They'd be on the fringe of what used to be the Romulan Star Empire. And that's where he picks up Raffi, right? And this colony has dealings with the Orion Syndicate because the Orion Syndicate has moved in. Maybe they're doing black market deals, or they're
trading the snakeweed.
Exactly. And so it's like you explain all that. She has the connection with the pirate guy who likes to smoke the cigars, or he also vapes or whatever. It's like all of a sudden, all you do is you just take it off Earth, you put it somewhere else, we get into space sooner, and all of a sudden these people's vices and habits make sense because they're not even on Earth anymore.
Yep.
They're out here, they're basically pirates. It's like, then if they smoke or they got peg legs or, friggin' parrots, nobody questions it. Of course, he's got a space parrot that smokes a cigar. He's a pirate.
And we also have that
holographic parrot.
Well, we have in Deep Space Nine. We have there was a story about O'Brien infiltrating the Orion Syndicate, and as I recall, the guy that he was friends with, I can't remember if he was an alien or not, but he was a very human-looking alien if he was an alien. But the idea was obviously humans do interact with the Orion Syndicate because O'Brien's human and they accept him as part of the syndicate. So this is unprecedented, and and I'm fine. You can explore the outer reaches of the Federation a lot more than I think Earth. That's the bottom line. Earth is a paradise. That's the idea. Earth is a paradise. Humans on Earth are more evolved, all that kind of stuff. Those are pillars of Star Trek. Pillars that Star Trek is built on. And you when you take those pillars away, that's when you screw everything up. And the thing is, you just came up in like a minute. Literally, you were only talking for like 2 minutes and fixed the story to make it Star Trek, and they could and still do their narrative. You didn't change the plot of the story at all. You just made it Trek. You know what I mean? You made it actually within the context of Star Trek because you care about Star Trek. You know this stuff. Why couldn't they do that? And Bobby says 60-second fix. You fixed and you didn't even change the story. 60-second fix, and now it's Star Trek. Now I like your show. Now I want to watch your show. Now I want to support your show. I want to promote your show because I'm a Trekkie and I think that's awesome. I get it. Orion Syndicate. And the fact of the matter is, you know, with Chabon's in-world explanation that this drug is in fact an Orion drug. Why not put that in the show?
It could be that Orion drug could be this other subplot that's running throughout the entire series, and we could be looking at, you know, not just drug dealing, but if we want to look at different segments of society or different things that normally we don't spend a lot of time with, you know, the kind of the economics and the social political impact of drug running as it relates to other things, such as, you know, immigration, slavery, whether you want to talk about, you know, prostitution, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different, there are ways that you can explore themes and ideas that we don't normally see in Star Trek. And you can, and this could be an interesting subplot. I don't, because it gets even worse. It's like Picard hops on a Federation starship, right? He's still out of Starfleet. He just uses his connections to get a jump seat, right? Like that makes sense, right? He's going to get a jump seat, and he hitches a ride on a Federation starship. We get some beautiful shots of a new Federation, a new Starfleet ship that we haven't seen before. We get to see some upgraded tech that takes care of our we don't look futuristic enough idea. We get into space faster, but then, hey, you know what? Let's find a next gen, a Voyager, a Deep Space Nine beloved, you know, side character, and they've been promoted to captain, and it's their ship. So we get a legacy guest star, all in one episode. They don't have to have a lot of scenes. They just show up in Picard's room and they go, "Hey, I'm happy to provide you the shuttle service." You know what I mean? And they could have a little witty banter.
That's fan service done right. Like if you know, God rest his soul, if it was Captain Nog, for instance, you know what I mean? Something like that. If it had been him, and that's all he does, and it's a cameo. He just ferries Picard over here, you know, that kind of thing, and that's it. You know what I mean? He says, "I wish I could help you more, Admiral, but you know, it is what it is. I'm glad I could do this for you." You know what I mean? Something like that. They could have done something really cool like that, and
you get the classic inspiring Trek theme when you see the ship fly by. You get the hum, you know, inside the ship. You know, we get to use the transporters a little bit more because we got to get down to the planet. We got to get on the ship. I mean, it's like, to me, I don't understand why this is so difficult. It's like they are so concerned, and this is my big problem. They are so concerned with dealing with real world problems that they're literally like tying it around this show's ankles, you know, like a weight, and it's literally pulling it down. It's like, you can still do all this stuff. It's not that you can't do this stuff in Star Trek. We've seen characters with addiction problems before. That's not anything new. you may do it in a way that's different, and they could still be, again, all be ex Starfleet. You can still do the same thing. It's just a couple little changes, and all of a sudden, it's a little bit more. They're so concerned with saying, in my mind anyway, and apologies to anyone who takes this the wrong way. I feel like they're so obsessed with the political spin on the show that it's hurting the show.
Well, that's what Akiva said in the previous Ready Room. That's what I took from his comments with Will Wheaton when Akiva was interviewed in the second episode of the Ready Room. I felt that all over the place in the things that he was saying, and he was admitting to that. That's what this show is, and it just takes away so much from Star Trek, in my opinion, because they're going to use the defense that, oh, well, Star Trek has always done stuff like this, not the way you're doing it, not the way you're doing it. I'll give a great example from the classic series, and I wish I remember the name of the episode. But in the original series, they had an episode that was about the Vietnam War. It was absolutely about the Vietnam War, and the premise was that they went to a planet, a very primitive planet, that Kirk had surveyed as a young officer. And he had met the indigenous people, and there were basically two sets of people. There were these like hill people that were very sort of tribal and very, very primitive. And then there were like these town people that had like these kind of small Pueblo type towns and stuff like that. But they lived in harmony. You know what I mean? There was a difference, but they lived in harmony. What has happened since Kirk was there is the Klingons found this planet. And what do? They find the more civilized people in the towns, start arming them with weapons, with flintlocks, because these people use bows and arrows. They start arming them with flintlocks to kill the hill people and take over the planet for the glory of the Klingon Empire, Yeah. Kirk finds out about this. He stumbles into this situation. He realizes that the only thing that he can do is try to help the hill people to balance out the contamination from the Klingons. This is the framework of the Vietnam War, the idea of the Soviet Union supplying, North Vietnam, while the United States, France before it, was supplying South Vietnam, and this is totally analogous to Vietnam. But it wasn't, the thing is, it was obvious, but it wasn't. That the context is very different, even though there's all sorts of parallels. It was the situation was the same, but it wasn't like they were trying to say this or that about the Vietnam War. If you watch the episode basically comes up with the idea that this is a really crappy situation, and we're not really sure what we should be doing. It's not pro-Vietnam War. It's not anti-Vietnam War. It's simply presenting the problem and letting you realize this is a problem. This is a complicated problem, and there's really no good answer in this. That's what that episode was about. Because Kirk doesn't come to the conclusion we shouldn't help these people. They're debating it. They don't come to a conclusion straight out. You know what I mean? They realize that the whole situation is just a complete cluster. You know what I mean? It's a messed up situation. And there isn't like this huge like pro-Vietnam or anti-Vietnam you can take from it. Pro-Vietnam people could take something from that episode and use it. Anti-Vietnam people could take something from that episode and use it. Well, it simply presents the problem.
And I tried to pull up some information. I think the episode you're referring to is Errand of Mercy.
It might be.
Because I think that was the one that introduced the Organians, if I remember correctly.
No, that's a different one.
Is that a different one?
That's a similar premise. The Organian one is a similar premise, but it's because it also involves the Klingons taking over a primitive civilization. But that's a different episode. That's the one with Korg, with Baltar, the great John Calicos.
John Calicos. Yeah,
that's not the episode I'm talking about. I'm talking about a different one, but everybody knows that episode who knows TOS. And some people are using that episode to justify what Picard is doing. But I'm just like, no, you don't get it, do you? Because that episode didn't take sides. That episode framed the argument and let the audience make their own conclusions. You know what I mean? It let people that were pro-Vietnam come away with something, and people that were anti-Vietnam come away with something. It didn't take a side. It didn't take a blatant stance and say, you're right, you're wrong, which is what Picard is doing. Picard's doing a lot of this.
Yeah. A private little war.
That sounds right. Yeah, Private Little War. That sounds right.
Wow, this is full of like just class, teleplay by Gene Roddenberry, directed by Mark Daniels, season 2, episode 19. Originally broadcast February 2nd, 1968.
Classic episode, and
Yeah,
it's being used to justify Picard, and I say no, because it's all about execution. And when you start to alienate, like an entire section of the fan base for political reasons, that episode didn't do that. That episode did not do that. However you felt about that issue, you came away with something, and you could use that in your own arguments and say, well, Star Trek, they said this. You know what I mean? So,
right.
because they understood the situation. They understood, like, we can't be letting the Klingons get away with this. But at the same time, it's like, but now we're destroying their civilization anyway. So what are we really doing? You know what I mean? Because
Right.
now the hill people aren't the peaceful hill people anymore. Now they're, have it. They even had a whole thing where the leader of the hill people was starting to, like, hate the other side because they end up killing his wife and everything like that. And he learns to hate. That's the end of the episode. And then they're kind of like, okay, now they hate him. Now we have our side. That was what happened at the end of the episode. Was the hill people's wife was killed, and he ends up deciding, all right, now I'll do your war, Kirk. I'll fight those Klingon inspired bastards till they're all dead. You know what I mean? And that's what it leads to. That's the bigger picture, right? That's what war leads to. No matter whether you're right or you're wrong or anything like that, it's going to lead in a lot of death and destruction, and people are going to die, and that's a universal theme. It's not saying Vietnam was good or bad, which is what Picard would do. Picard would say, Vietnam bad. That's it. Like with a club over your head. There's no nuance. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And Bobby had another comment. He says, we watch and read amazing stories to get away from real world problems. Thank you, Bobby. That's why I like sci-fi, because I want to get away from reality. Said it's getting old that everyone uses every platform possible to push social views. And I agree with you, Bobby. Says, I don't mind some of it, but it's become almost everything. That's the problem. It's like, no, I don't mind some of it either. I don't mind artists trying to express ideas or try to make the world better, but do it in a creative way. Do it in a way where you don't start polarizing everything and everyone. You know what I mean? Take the high road. Take the stealing is wrong approach instead of, like, giving me a very specific example of like Les Miserables, where the guy stole a loaf of bread, and now the police officer's chasing him for the rest of his life. Okay.
Right.
Stealing is still wrong. Okay. Stealing is still wrong. But clearly in that situation, it's like, hey, the guy was starving to death, and you don't need to, like, make his life a living hell for, right? You know what I mean? Right. There are ways to do this, is what I'm trying to say. There are ways to do this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. That's kind of my big thing, because it just doesn't make it a lot of fun. Like the first episode, I rewatched the first episode because it was a lot of fun things I enjoyed. I like the action sequences with Dodge. I liked the opening sequence with Data on board the Enterprise. I liked a lot of the imagery, like where Data's painting the daughter. Like there was a lot of fun, interesting ideas in the first episode. And as we move on, we're just kind of stuck in kind of similar places and just mired in kind of the same thing. I'm hoping now that we're getting out into space, maybe now it'll feel more like Trek, and something more interesting is going to come from it. I hope. I mean, like I said, this episode was better than the last one. It did have some fun action sequences in it. I did think it was interesting. We saw the caretakers. We saw them, with skills, and then I actually paused it so I could explain to my wife, who didn't read the Countdown comic. Oh, these guys are kind of like James Bond, special agent, like spy type people. That's why they know how to do this, because they didn't really, because I imagine a lot of people were kind of confused. I mean, they kind of get it. It's like, okay, well, she's ex-Tal Shiar, he's ex-Tal Shiar. Okay, whatever. I don't know. And it just, to me, just a lot of this is just kind of that. It's weird because they don't want to give us Trek tropes, but they want us to understand an awful lot.
I love that.
We're not gonna do, yeah, because it's like we're not gonna do a Trek trope. We're not gonna show you something that you should, that's just classic, whatever, because you've seen that 1,000 times. But we're gonna assume that you already know all this. We're gonna assume you understand the Tal Shiar as like special forces people, because the people who were after Dodge, they clearly told us were not the Tal Shiar. They were someone else.
They're the super Tal Shiar, which doesn't that mean they should actually kick the caretakers' asses?
Yeah,
Since
you would think
they're the even better Tal Shiar. That's one thing I was like, that to me is a logical inconsistency. No, I get it. Like if you want to be really realistic, how is a Delta Force guy and a SEAL gonna how would that kind of fight go down with a Delta Force and a SEAL? You assume a Delta Force is actually better than a SEAL because they're supposed to be a more elite organization than the SEALs. But in practical terms, would it probably be pretty even? Yeah, I'll grant you that. But when you're doing a TV show, you know what I mean? You're talking about, right. Well, these are supposed to be the super Tal Shiar. These are supposed to be like the really good guys. And they just clean their clocks. They you know what I mean? The caretakers clean their clocks.
I was shocked that one of the caretakers didn't die.
That would have made it better.
They showed up, I was like going, okay, who's gonna get it? It's gonna be the dude or the lady. Who's gonna get it? Because one of them is not gonna survive this if the car wash or the vat wash or whatever they're called, if they're as bad as they said they are, then one of them clearly, because that I remember watching, I was like, oh, one of them's gonna die, right? It's like maybe he'll have one of them will have an interesting little bit of dialogue that will inform what's going on. But no, they both survived, and I'm just like, yeah. Well, and the Romulan,
and I, you know what I didn't understand also was why didn't they go with Picard? The security of the chateau was compromised. There's a little throwaway line. He said the alarms didn't work or whatever. So the security of the chateau has clearly been compromised. Why not just leave? I mean, the chateau is clearly not safe. Why does Picard leave his slaves behind, at the chateau? I mean, I didn't understand, especially when they're shown to be useful. They're obviously useful. You know what I mean? So why not bring them with you?
Well, and one of them actually I can't remember if it was the dude or the lady, but one of them actually makes the comment, you need someone to help protect you. And they spend time showing us that Picard's age is catching up to him. Spoiler alert, we know Picard's dying of something. So it's like, you would think they would go with him, or shocker, in my version of the story, one of them dies because they're not as efficient as the, I don't know. I keep
Super Tal Shiar. The Super Tal Shiar.
Yeah, the Super Tal Shiar. They're not as bad as the Super Tal Shiar. So one of them would die, and the other one would go on that journey, to get him to the pirate crew that's somewhere off in space. So,
but you saw the preview, right? You saw the preview at the end for the next episode.
Yeah, that's the Romulan, like the camp, and the
see that?
Lord of the Rings guy. Yeah.
Did you see this image before?
Yeah, I saw that actually on. I did see that someone actually was posting that around.
This is what we're getting. Like, this is Picard's protector, even though the caretakers clearly are capable, clearly could do this role. We've already seen them in 3 episodes. No, episode 4, we got to introduce yet another character, and this is going to be Picard's protector, the Romulan elf.
Wow. Well, there you go, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully it's, I don't know.
I'll say this. I can end this on a good note in my terms and say that it is a better episode than episode 2. We now at least have a complete story.
Yeah.
We have like one story. Took us 3 episodes to get one story, with a beginning, middle to end.
Yeah.
But at least we have that. And now we go forward. We know we got to pick up Romulan elf guy. We know that's going to happen. Oh, by the way, did you catch the north and south thing to explain the foreheads?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember back in the day? That's how they used to, not canon, but fans. That's how they explained the TOS Klingons versus the new Klingons. That was a fan theory back in the day. So I'm wondering maybe somebody knew that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people criticize that, and I get the criticism. But back in the day, the fan theory about why the TOS Klingons look different than the movie Klingons is because they're from different hemispheres. That was the theory that used to go around the convention floor. I remember that as a kid. People used to talk about that. They talked about that on stage to explain it and stuff like that. Not anybody from the show, just fans, people, organizers and stuff like that. It was a fan theory.
I have a weird thought and an observation. During a lot of the episodes, you bring up that documentary. What is it? Crisis on the Bridge.
Yeah,
they may have got the name wrong.
Chaos on the Bridge. Chaos on the Bridge. And
then I know from having actually listened on Audible, I did the 50-year history. That starts with the creation of the original pilot all the way through to where the first, I think first or second, the J.J. Abrams films, and they take all these interviews and all this information and they compile it together to put together like a complete view of Star Trek's history. And one of the recurring themes that comes up in a lot of stuff is the issues that people had with Gene, where someone would have an idea or a concept or something they wanted to do, and Gene would say, well, that's not Star Trek, so we can't do that. I have this weird feeling it's the opposite now, that there's someone in there going, well, that's old Star Trek. We're not doing that.
No, that's exactly what it is now. I mean, come on. That's not even something that you can argue. You know what I mean? They clearly are taking, again, Chaos on the Bridge. I totally recommend it for people. It's so good in terms of the history and the drama of making Next Generation and what the writers really thought. And we've talked about this. One of the biggest things that they hated was the no conflict rule, that the humans are not supposed to be, fighting each other. They're not supposed to be having all these problems like modern humans. And then they'd be like, well, how can you have a story without conflict? And again, my response has always been, you use the aliens to do that. You use the aliens, then you can show the conflict. And of course, they don't do that in this one. You know what I mean? So, it can be done. It's just it takes effort. It takes effort. You have to know what you're doing. You have to understand what you're doing. You have to understand the world building, the pillars of Trek. But, right now, they're just trying to take all the pillars down.
Yeah, it does appear that way. Do you have anything else, or is that good for this episode?
Well, like I said, I'll try to end on a good note and say it is better than episode 2.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
And at least we have a full story at this point.
Yeah. I would agree. I did like it much better than the second episode. And I did like the fact that we actually got into a ship and we got a semblance of what the crew is going to be like. I kind of like the pirate captain guy. He's got the opposite. That's his emergency medical hologram. And I guess for him, I would imagine for him as an actor, it's got to be fun to play such different characters. That all that stuff was fun. And all I kept thinking of is like, why couldn't we have gotten here faster? Because I kept hearing Patrick Stewart in interviews talking about how the actors are doing interesting things and that people will like the crew. And it's by the time we got everyone together on the ship, I was like, well, this is kind of an interesting assemblage of people. I don't care for Raffi too much, but the pirate captain guy is kind of interesting. I like the scientist, basically the dataologist, I'm going to call it. She seems interesting. Her connection to Bruce Maddox, I'm really curious to learn more about that. And I'm curious to see where they find Bruce Maddox, if he's even alive. So there are some things I'm very interested in. And it is things that do connect us back to classic Trek. We still have a lot of fun cameos. I'm glad that we didn't burn through, Riker and Troy in these 3 episodes. I'm glad that we have them to look forward to. I'm glad that we have 7 to look forward to. So
I
I'm
heard seven's in the
still,
next episode. That's what I heard, is that 7 is in the next episode. So we'll see if that pans out or not.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to it, and like I said, this is a much better episode than the second one. I hate where we've left Starfleet, in such mired disarray. But I'm hoping now that we're actually out in space, that we'll have a lot more fun. It'll be a lot more adventurous. I don't have to have stuff blowing up every 10 minutes, but let's just make it more interesting. All this sitting around on Earth going, "Whoa, this sucks." Okay, I get it.
It looks like we are going to get our first space battle. They showed the preview. It looks like we're going to see that bird of prey take on the ship that they're on, which I don't remember the name of it. But hey,
Yeah.
space battle finally, episode 4.
Yeah, about time. So that'll be fun. So yeah, so on a positive note, it is better than the second one, and I am looking forward to. We got a lot. I feel like we still have a lot of fun things to look forward to. Maybe some more Brent Spiner Data cameos. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of possibility. So cool.
Oh, and Bobby said, let's give him the last word on this. Says, thank you guys. I look forward to Wednesday nights now, and thanks for the drawing.
Oh, that's awfully kind of you to say, Bobby. We greatly appreciate that. We're glad that you're here, participating, being part of the show. It makes it more fun and entertaining for us. You summed up, this one, the Final Frontier eventually, which would have been a great title for this episode, actually.
Yeah, that would be a great title for the episode.
Yeah. If we were doing the podcast, that totally would be the title of this episode, because that's just perfect.
I'll have to do that when I make the clips, because I always take the YouTube version of the show, and I always go back the next day and I break it up by topic. I think I'm going to use your title there, Bobby.
Yeah, that's just perfect. That's just perfect. So if that's good, I guess we'll go ahead and we'll wrap things up here.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. All right. So I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beaty. I've been one of your hosts. I want to encourage everyone who's watching the episode right now, please go over to my website, davebeaty.com, and take part in our survey, sign up for our email newsletter. You have the opportunity to win this piece of original art. This is ink on paper. This is a sample piece I did way back when I was working on Brightest Day for DC Comics. So I want to encourage everyone to go there, take part of the survey. We're using that information to create a better, hopefully more entertaining show for you, as well as some of these additional materials we're wanting to create, such as the email newsletter and also this quarterly, we were just discussing, probably quarterly digital magazine that we're hoping to produce as well. That will have all kinds of fun, interesting content. All of this obviously, goes along with the show, but it's just kind of fun, interesting things we think you will enjoy. They're not going to cost you anything extra. They're not going to be littered with tons of advertisements or anything either. It's just fun, entertaining content for all of us to enjoy. So I want to encourage that people please go and do that. We're using that information to help put together a better program and package actually for you. So please go to my website. Please take part in the survey and sign up for the newsletter. You'll get reminders of the shows, all that kind of fun stuff. It's going to be fun. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, for once again just providing his own unique insights, which always, again, adds to the conversation and makes this terribly entertaining for all of us. So, Eric, please tell the folks watching or listening where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most accessible on Twitter. That's where I'm most active on social media. This is also streaming on YouTube in case you're using another platform such as Twitch or Twitter or Facebook. So you can find me at BaseGod14 on Twitter and YouTube and Twitch as well. I believe my Twitch account is also BaseGod14. So that's BaseGod14, BASSGOD14.
Very cool. So we hope that you will basically come back next week. We're still kind of discussing what next week's episode is, but we know that hopefully you'll find it terribly entertaining. We have some fun things planned for some episodes coming up. I think that at the very least, you'll be entertained. So I want to thank you for watching this episode, and we hope to see you again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. I think it's Mountain Standard Time.